to Election Night live here in Paris on France 24 with me, Armand Georgian.
And with me, Gavin Lee. 4 days of voting, almost 400 million people eligible to vote. Over the course of the next hour, we're going to bring you all of the details, the projected results of the European Parliament elections. Remember, it's across 27 different countries. So we're going to explain what it all means, how the EU power dynamic could shift too.
We'll have the latest figures for the evening and full analysis tonight of what's going on as it unfolds, starting here in France.
So let's start at the HQ of President Macron's Renaissance Party, part of the liberal centrist Renew Europe group, with Claire Paquelin.
And we'll be at the far-right National Rally Party headquarters tonight with James Andre.
We have Yinka Oyotode standing by at the Socialist Party headquarters.
And Valerie Hayer at the far-left party of France Unbowed.
And we will be across Europe as the projected results come in, reporting the stories of the night as they develop. Dave Keating is awaiting projections with the press back, the politicians in Brussels.
Seema Gupta is standing by in Rome. We'll be talking to Nick Holdsworth in Berlin about estimates from Germany, which have already come in.
And we've got Sarah Morris standing by for us in Madrid, and Luke Brown in Budapest in Hungary, a key player, of course.
And we'll talk to Fernand van Tetz in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, the first country to vote on Thursday.
And here with us in the studio in Paris, we have France 24's Catalina Marchant de Abreu. Catalina.
Hello, Gavin. Hello, Armin. I will bring in the live projection of results as soon as they come in. What we have so far are the results of the outgoing parliament as of May 2024. This will be updated as soon as results come in the next 30 minutes or so.
OK, and to give the big picture, to break down into the minutiae too, we have French politics editor Marc Perelman. Big night. We should know results with it about for France. Maybe estimated projections, 28 minutes.
28 minutes. We'll know them sharp. Yes.
Well, let's start here in Paris. James Andre is at the headquarters of the far-right National Rally. James, set the scene for us there tonight.
Yes, well, I'm in this eastern part of Paris in this pavilion, which is in the forest. It's rather a nice venue, and, well, we have seeing a lot of people arriving. They have been arriving. We see militants, but also party leaders who are present, who are answering questions, journalists, etc. And indeed, well, a lot of question marks tonight, of course, for now. We're waiting for these projections, of course. But one of the party leaders was telling me that, of course, what everybody will be looking at is how many MPs the party can put at the European Parliament, and that, of course, will define, the power play between all these hard-right parties on the European level. Will they manage to create a supergroup to the right of the right in the European Parliament, and who will head that supergroup? Well, these are, of course, all the questions that are up in the air while we wait for these results. And, of course, Jordan Bardella, who is the head of this European list, well, he has arrived here. We've been told that he is, in the back getting ready for his speech, which is expected shortly after the official estimates are announced.
Thanks very much, James. We'll be coming back to you, of course, in the next half hour or so. Meanwhile, Claire Paquelin is at the headquarters of President Macron's party, which only narrowly lost to the far right last time around. Claire, what's the feeling where you are?
Well, I've been speaking to some of the supporters in the room here, people who've come to support Valerie Hayer. She's, of course, leading this presidential majority list. And I've got to say, I'm detecting some nerves, people telling me that they're trying to be optimistic. But it's fair to say, I think, that their candidate has had some difficulty getting her voice heard. She's not a well-known politician here in France. Her poster as leading that presidential majority list was only announced a few months ago, so she's really had to try and make her voice heard in a small amount of time, and her rivals, some of her rivals in this campaign, have been in the spotlight now for several months. So that's been a challenge for her, but her supporters will say, look, she has considerable experience in the European Parliament. She's actually chair of the Renew group there, so that, of course, is at the moment, in the last 5 years, been the third largest group in the European Parliament. So they say she has considerable experience. We're rooting for her, but certainly I would say that there's a little bit of nerves, anxiety in the room here tonight as we wait for those estimated results to come through in a little under half an hour.
Okay, Claire, thank you so much. Claire Paquelin from the Renaissance headquarters. Now let's turn back to Catalina in the studio here for a look at voter turnout in France.
Indeed, let's first compare the final turnout for European elections compared 2019 to what we have so far. The 2019 European elections marked an overall sharp increase in participation compared to 2014. This also applies to France that recorded a 50.12% participation rate, marking an increase in 7.69 percentage points since the election in 2014. In France, we talk about abstention rates. So this translates to a 49.9 abstention rate in 2019, which is major. Almost half of the French population abstained from voting in 2019. This year, it seems similar estimations coming in. The French abstention rate is estimated at 48%. As of 5 p.m. This afternoon, marking a slight increase in voter participation in France. We will update these figures and estimations as soon as they come in.
It's really interesting. If we go back to what the Spanish say, en el año de la pera, the year of the pear, back in 1979, we were seeing 62% turnouts. Then it went down in the 90s, 2000s to about, well, 40s. So it's gone back up 2019. It looks like it's a pretty similar, if not a higher turnout today. Let's go to Lisa Kamenov. Sunny day here in Paris. She's at a polling station. Few minutes left, Lisa, of voting.
Absolutely. So I'm outside this polling station in the centre of Paris. As you said, a few minutes left. Most of the voters have already cast their ballot, but we're still expecting the last influx of voters to come in just before the polling station closes. As Catalina was saying, the latest turnout figure was 45.26%. Now, the Ipsos research agency here in France did say that the figures are already overall looking higher than in previous years, and this could be due to the larger scale of the election this year. Here in France, we do have 2 million more registered voters than in 2019. They are voting. They are choosing between 38, a record number of lists, putting 81 members to the European Parliament, and of course the European Parliament itself has 720 seats, which is up from 705 back in 2019. So it will be interesting to see how the scale of this election impacts the final results. But like you said, we have to wait for the official announcement later this evening.
So, Lizzie, you say we've got an abstention rate through, so we can kind of flip reverse it, minus a percentage or two, and think, OK, well, at this rate, we might have around 52% voters. Is there a demographic breakdown? Who's voting? What ages?
So speaking to polling station staff throughout the day, the demographic has actually varied depending on the neighbourhood and the towns in France. So this morning we were in Saint-Denis, a suburb north of Paris, and most of the people voting there tend to be between mid-40s and mid-60s, very few youth, whereas the polling station here in central Paris saw pretty much half elderly people, half youth. It's also one of the polling stations which tends to have a higher rate of participation. But speaking to a student who came here to vote, he did say that the youth could be among the largest groups of people who are abstaining. And this is because they don't feel particularly represented by any of the candidates. And also a lot of them felt like there wasn't enough communication and they don't really know how the EU concerns them or how the result of this vote could impact their daily lives.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, Liz. To come back to Mark Perlman, our French politics editor in the studio. Mark, what do you think of the visibility of this campaign? How sort of high profile do you think it's been?
Well, it's not been high profile, Armin, to put it mildly. And this is why the turnout figure is somewhat surprising, because people thought the French are not interested. They don't want to hear about this. The European Parliament is too complicated. It's too far away. We don't know what they do, what they rule on, essentially. And there was also a lot of disappointment with many of the traditional parties that we've seen in other elections. So the assumption was that the turnout could be lower than the previous time. This is, according to our partners, not going to be the case tonight. The question now is whether this will make a difference. Last time around, the Greens made a last-minute push. They really had a bump in the results compared to the previous polls. Let's see if this plus 2% in turnout makes a difference, because obviously it's only still half of the French who are going to be voting. So this might make a difference because the polls have been very stable for the past 2 months. We'll have to see, but it's interesting because at least the French did not really disappoint more the politicians who were hoping that they would turn out, not in droves, but at least in a decent fashion.
Mark, and if, also worth saying, if people are watching France 24 tonight and you're wondering why we're not getting straight into the sticky stuff, the depths of the political analysis, we're in still right now in electoral silence. We've got about 20 or so minutes until we can start to unleash and get a real sense of what's going on. So in that time, though, let's go to the Socialist headquarters here in France and let's pick up with Yinka Oyotadi. What's the mood like there?
Hi there, Gavin. Yes, I'm here at an auditorium in Belleville. It's called the Bellevilloise, and it's a live music venue. But here is also where the first cooperative in Paris was created in 1877. So it seems quite appropriate that the Socialists have decided to pick this venue as their venue for election night. As you can probably hear, there's very much a upbeat atmosphere. It's very lively. There's a live DJ actually playing music, and there's really a hopeful and optimistic atmosphere here at the Socialist HQ. Speaking to some of the party members, they say that while today marks the end of a long campaign, it also marks, hopefully, the start of a beautiful adventure in Europe. It's important to remember that 5 years ago in 2019, the Socialist Party were able to secure 6.2% of the votes. That translated to 6 seats. So we'll have to see what tonight will hold.
Well, thanks very much, Yinka. And let's go to the far left now in France, the France Unbowed Party, and Valerie Hayer is there. Valerie, what is the party faithful? What are they hoping for tonight?
Yes, Armin. Well, it's a bright sunny day here in Paris, and you could even say that that sunlight has really shone its way into the France Unbowed headquarters here in the 19th arrondissement. The mood is very dynamic, if you will. There is also a fair amount of supporters that have turned themselves up to support outside the building. Many of them are quite young, a few of them also wearing the keffiyeh, the Palestinian scarves, as the party has made itself quite clear on its stance, calling for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. But there's definitely an undercurrent of optimism running through at the headquarters here tonight. People are in pretty good spirits, and they're definitely hoping to build on the last election results from 2019, where France Unbowed gained about 6.3% of the seats. Now, I did speak to some party members earlier, and they told me that they feel confident. They feel that they ran a strong campaign overall, and they've done their best, and they really hope that it just reflects in those results tonight. So ultimately, the mood here is hopeful, and they're very upbeat about their chances to keep that momentum moving forward, but we'll have to see later on, Armin.
Yeah, and interesting you mentioned about the Palestinian flag. That's been a real dividing line in this whole EU election campaign between the left and the right, with support for Israel really coming from the more right-wing part of the political spectrum. But let's talk a bit now about how the parliamentary groups in the European Parliament work. Who are they and how do they work together? We'll get that with Catalina again here in the studio.
Exactly, Armin. Let's take a look at the main parties to look out for during these European elections and the key players within these parties. Just a reminder, this is from the outgoing European Parliament from 2024, as these figures will still be updated. Over the years, there are two main political groups that dominated in the European elections. The Conservatives, the EPP in English, led in this election by Ursula von der Leyen, and the Socialists, the SND, led in this election by Nicolas Schmidt. Although these groups are the dominating dominating groups in the EU. They have lost seats in the past 2 European elections. Then we have the far right with the ID, Identity and Democracy group, a major player in elections to look out for. The main points of suspense in France: how big will be the victory of the far right with Jordan Bardella and Marine Le Pen's National Rally, who belong to the EU's ID far right group. Then we have the European Conservatives and Reformists, ECR, a group whose president is Italy's Giorgia Meloni, the group located in the right, not to be confused with the far right. Finally, we have the centrist group Renew Europe. French President Emmanuel Macron. Macron's Renaissance belongs to this group in the European Parliament. We also have the Greens, who saw a major victory during the 2019 elections with what's called the Green Wave in the EU. But for now, the EPP is still the largest group in the EU Parliament with the most seats right now as of 2024, maintaining the agenda-setting power, including the choice for the next Commission president.
Katerina, thank you. OK, so we have some of the first early projected results. I want to flash this up from Germany, where we have a sense of how things are looking tonight. You see the biggest notable difference: the Christian Democrats, the old party of Angela Merkel, in the EPP, the centre-right, CDU, the biggest vote here, nearly 30% of the vote. Then, notably, AfD, the Alternative for Germany, 16.5%. Some would say, some analysts are saying this evening, they are a big winner this evening, rising from 11% back in 2019. And look here, we've got the SPD, the Social Democrats of Chancellor Olaf Scholz on the centre-left. They have had a bad night tonight that we're looking at. It's particularly bad that they're in third place. At Greens, 12%. They were the story back. Remember, back in 2019, they saw a significant rise. There was big talk of climate change. That was on the agenda, not tonight. They are, from these early predicted results, they are also suffering. The left, 8.3%. And also on the FDP as well, the Free Democratic Party of Christian Lindner, centre-right, 5%, just making the threshold, because if you get less than that, you don't have a single seat in Parliament. I want to quickly bring in Mark Perelman here for the moment. This is a bit of a shock for Olaf Scholz tonight.
This is more than a bit of a shock. This is a major, major defeat for the German Chancellor, clearly. And not only for him, for all the three parties members of his coalition, the Greens and the FDP. They took a beating tonight. Clearly, the Conservatives, who were in a bad position, are bouncing back. And the AfD, despite all the controversies of the last weeks and so on, people thought they would not score big, but they did score big. 16% for the AfD is a major, major performance for them. We'll see if this is an omen for the other rulers in the EU, but clearly Germany is already sending a very, very strong message through this European Parliament election.
The AfD is a very interesting story, because if you look at the start of the year, their leader in Europe, Maximilian Krah, they had a spy scandal, alleged that he had links in his assistant with China and taking money for China, which he denies. They saw a slump in the polls. Then recently we saw a stabbing of a police officer, death of a police officer, a rally, allegations that this was a migrant from Afghanistan who arrived in 2014. The party used that, certainly the opposition would say, weaponised that to say this needs to be on the agenda, a big plank for them. In fact, it's worth saying, Jean-Yves Camus, welcome to you in the studio. I know you just arrived with us, political scientist, far-right expert. Just give us your initial reading of those results coming in from Germany.
Well, my first reading is that Maximilian Krah was obviously right when he shows the radical path during his campaign. Despite all the controversies, including the last one, which had to do with the Waffen-SS, which he believes is not a criminal organization, which is quite extreme. We see tonight that the outcome is very good for the AfD, maybe also because of this stabbing which recently took place. And, of course, the AfD capitalized on that and tried to show that immigration was the #1 problem in Germany.
And do you think, Jean-Yves Camus, that this will be a boost to that whole group in the Parliament, Identity and Democracy? Because, of course, the other members will be watching Germany very clearly, the AfD being such an important partner for them. And its performance will be very closely scrutinized, won't it?
Yes, there are two options, actually. The first one is that Marine Le Pen, who has repeatedly said over the last few months that she doesn't want to continue working with the AFD, will say, okay, they are strong, 16.5, so let's think about it. Maybe we can reach some kind of a compromise. The other possibility is that Mr. Kra had been into talks recently with other much more radical parties, especially from Eastern Europe, to set up a new group in the Euro Parliament. But he will probably have the necessary number of MEPs, but you know, you not only need to have a certain number of MEPs, they need to come from a certain number of member states. And this is a criteria he will probably not meet.
I would like to talk a little bit about Germany in terms of campaigning all of the parties, because you mentioned, we talked about this stabbing, this death of a police officer at a far-right rally, to which it seems certainly politically many parties, including Olaf Scholz, are kind of talking about migration on the agenda in ways that they weren't before, aware of a potential swing. How do you think that's affected the political climate?
That has certainly affected the political climate because on the left of the political spectrum, we see that the movement recently set up by Sarah Wagenknecht, formerly from Die Linke, meets the 5% threshold and will send MEPs to Brussels. So even on the left, there are people nowadays who say we need to say something about immigration. But the story in Germany is much the same as that in France. Even when the left begins talking about immigration, the voters go to the party that, took that on his agenda first, many, many years ago. And this is the extreme right.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Jean-Yves Chemis. We'll be coming back to you shortly, of course. But for now, let's go to Brussels and our correspondent, Dave Keating. Dave, what's the state of play and how are things looking with what you're seeing now for the estimates so far?
Well, I'm here in the official results center. They've set this up in the hemicycle of the European Parliament, actually. And so as we're getting these exit polls, of course, we're getting the different groups kind of spinning the result. For Germany, for the center-left group, the SND, there was no spinning that. That was a disaster for them because Germany has a lot of seats in the European Parliament. It's a large country, and this is a big, big drop for a very significant part of that group. Now, in about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, we're going to get the first projection of what the new European Parliament will look like based on some of those exit polls, also some official results from countries where polls have closed already. So that will be interesting to see. That will be very preliminary, but that will be our first indication of what the new European Parliament will look like. And of course, the big story this year is the potential new power of the far right. We don't know exactly what type of gain they will have, but the big question is, could they get enough seats to actually be a potential partner for the center-right EPP and for the European Parliament to have a right-wing majority? That is still an unlikely prospect based on the opinion polls that we've seen, but it is possible, and that's the big thing people here in the results center will be watching tonight.
Dave, very interesting. Your screen's turned a bit of fuzz in a most unfortunate place on your face, but we'll be back with a corrected screen, no doubt, very soon. Let me introduce Arantxa González-Laya. Pleasure to have you in the studio, former foreign minister in Spain under the Sanchez coalition government 2020-2021, and now Dean of the University of Political Science, Sciences Po here in Paris. Now, we are in a moment of electoral silence, so we have to be cautious for about 16 minutes, but just give me a general feeling. Anxious, nervous, hopeful?
No, I mean, I trust the European voter. I trust that they will make the right choice. I trust that they will reflect a bit of the anxiousness that exists in European politics at the moment. But I also trust that at the end of the day, this big centre that drives European politics, Christian Democrats, Social Democrats, Liberals and Greens, will hold and will be hopefully the engine that with a bit more difficulty than in the past legislature, will still be able to drive the European Union forward.
You are a seasoned political force. Just let me ask you, obviously now with Science Po as an outside looking in, but how many European Parliament elections can you count now that you've been involved in the past?
Quite a few. Last 30 years.
Wow.
Last 30 years. And it's every European Parliament election has been different. Last time it was all about whether which countries should leave the EU. Remember, after Brexit, there was Frexit, then there was Italexit.
We still had British parties involved in the 2019 elections.
Correct. But that was then, thus is now. Now it's not about exiting the European Union. Now it's changing the European Union from within. The terms of the debate have changed. And the European citizens have understood this. If you ask them what they need, they say they want protection, competitiveness, jobs, and security, because they see a war next door. Now, I'm not sure that a lot of what we've seen happening in the elections have presented the problem in these terms. The terms of the debate today should be the response to the challenges that the European citizens face, more national policies, more national solutions, more national politics, or more federalist, more European solutions. We know where the EU is not integrated, the EU is weaker, and it protects the citizens less. This is what the new cast of characters, Parliament, Commission, and Council will find on their table.
Really interesting.
Okay, well, thank you so much. We'll come back to you, of course, very shortly. But let's have a quick hit with our Rome correspondent, Seema Gupta, of course, in Italy. The Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, who is the leader of the hard right, European Conservative and Reformist, but is not actually going to take up a seat in the European Parliament. But Seema, I gather Giorgia Meloni has been speaking earlier today. Where's she heading with this whole European election?
Well, she's really trying to sort of repeat the result that she had at a national level, and that in repeating that in the European level, that she's hoping to tighten the grip on the Italian politics. Now, her Brothers of Italy party, a far-right party that's part of the European Conservatives and Reformist grouping. Now, they're projected to do well, like several other far-right parties around Europe. Now, she's tipped as such to be a kingmaker, taking center stage here in Europe. She's being courted by different right-wing parties. She's got the center-right grouping of the European People's Party, the EU Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen. She's hoping to get a second term, and she's seeking Meloni's support. And she's even said that Meloni is clearly a pro-European person, a pro-European politician. So she's hoping to get her support so that she can get that second term. So you've got the centre-right trying to get her support. And at the same time, you've got France's Marine Le Pen, who's part of the National Rally Party, the leader of that party, who's part of the Identity and Democracy grouping, and the far-right super group she wants to create with Meloni. So she's been courted on both sides, but for the moment, she's not really saying who she's going to be supporting. We'll have to see what comes out at the end of these European elections. Voting continues till 11 p.m. here in Italy.
OK, the Meloni gambit. We're going to get onto that with you, Seema, later on in the programme. We've got about 90 seconds now until we start to see the result from here in France. I'm going to bring in Mark Perelman. Mark, you talked about the turnout. I just want to give us a sense of how the campaigns have been going. You mentioned earlier that they haven't been particularly strong in the last few months.
No, it's true. I mean, politicians have had a hard time trying to interest the French public to this election, what it means for them. And some have tried to frame it as a national election, that this is all about Emmanuel Macron. We just learned, by the way, that the French president will address the French people tonight, which is rather unusual in an election night. We've heard him a lot in the last few days.
He's been on the media a lot, to be fair.
He's been in the media, much to the chagrin of his opponents, who said it was unfair, that it shouldn't be this way before European elections. But obviously, this shows that it's an important election, especially for the French president.
But it's worth noting, it's fairly unusual on an election night the president gets involved. It's usually left to the leader of the European party, isn't it?
It's true, but Europe is at the heart of Emmanuel Macron's commitment, and I think he wants to talk about this tonight.
OK, as you can see, the clock ticking. In the next 10 seconds, we are going to get a sense of the political landscape here in France for French parties in the 2024 European elections. And this is how the political landscape looks tonight. It is the National Rally, the far-right National Rally, 31.5%, double that of Renew, Emmanuel Macron's party. You can see the European candidate on the screen, Valerie Hayer, on 15.2%. Remember, back in 2019, there was only 1 percentage point in it. National Rally winning on 23%. So significant victory tonight, as many of the polls have suggested. In third, the Socialist Party, you can see Raphael Glucksmann, former journalist, on 14%. He talked about Réveiller l'Europe, or Rewake Europe. And the Socialist parties are waking up as well because they performed badly in 2019. And we look at the far left, the France Insoumise, France Unbowed, 8.7% tonight. I want to go to the HQ of the winning party tonight, where there will no doubt be celebrations. And let's go to James Andre.
Yes, well, indeed, here, as you can hear, these militants behind me are chanting "On a gagné," which is just what, indeed, they just discovered these results, which are excellent. Just a few minutes ago, I was discussing with a young militant of the RNJ, the Rassemblement National Jeune. He was telling me that 30% would be considered by him and by the party as a victory. Well, that is indeed, it's actually more than that. We can now expect that the Rassemblement National, National Rally, will be sending, you know, probably at least 30 MEPs to the European Parliament, and that, of course, is going to put them in a place where they will be there will be the largest group of nationalist right-wing MEPs. And the big question is, of course, how will they leverage that politically in Europe? But indeed, according to these estimates, well, yes, it's a very clear victory. And you could see it on the faces of those who are here at the beginning of this evening that are obviously expecting a very good result. One other militant was telling me that he considered that Jordan Bardella had indeed led a very good campaign, that indeed Valerie Hayer, the main opponent, did, according to them again, a bad campaign, and that they were expecting good results tonight. So that's what we are seeing indeed. We are seeing a very high score for the National Rally. In 2019 it was 23.34%. So of course leaping to over 30% is a very good number indeed for the party, a very good result for them.
And James, have you got a sense there of what party activists want this to lead to in terms of a shake-up in French politics? You talked about the sort of European dimension already, but what impact do you think this might have on the French national political scene based on people you've been talking to?
Yes, well, I was speaking earlier on to an MP of the National Rally. He was telling me that he believes that, of course, a big result here today would be a very clear message. He put it like that. He said, you know, it's going to be a very clear message to those in power, including here in France, that these ideas of, you know, nationalist right-wing ideas are very much in the lead today in Europe, and that he says, you know, they will have to stop ignoring us. This is what he said. He said that, yes, it was a message to, obviously, to Emmanuel Macron, a message to the French government, and that, well, they were expecting to see changes, also saying that it was a clear message when it comes to the structure of Europe themselves. One telling me that they wanted to make it very clear that for them, Europe needed to be a federation of nation states, sovereign nation states, and not a super, you know, United States of Europe. And well, for them, this result is a pretty clear message that this is once again what they say, but this is what they believe the public wants. And of course, it is a very a very strong result. You've got to realize that the score of the National Rally is double the score of the second party, which is, Renew, the party of Emmanuel Macron. So yes, this is an electoral victory for the National Rally.
Really interesting, James. One thing you can tell, and the guests in the studio, Arantxa, Mark, Jean-Yves, and certainly Armin as well, from previous election campaigns, you know where the cameras are, where the journalists head to, behind in the background. That's where they expect a result. I want to see what the situation is at the Renaissance Party, the party of Emmanuel Macron, Valerie Hayer, and let's go to Claire Paquelin tonight.
I'm not detecting any joy in the room. There was clapping as those results came out, those estimated results came out, but there's certainly a feeling of disappointment. What we're looking at in these estimated results that Valerie Hayer has 15.2%, so we're looking at around 14.
Okay. We're going to come straight back to you, Claire, but this is going to be a busy night. We're going to go straight back to the National Rally headquarters. This is the leader in Europe, 28-year-old leader of the party, Jordan Bardella.
Allowing Rassemblement National to go beyond the 30% threshold, the French people have spoken, and clearly. We welcome this result humbly. We know what it means, and we know the responsibility that now weighs on us. People fought from the very bottom all the way to the top of the Republic, and tonight we have heard a request for change and also a way forward. This is a clear message sent to Emmanuel Macron, to European leaders, and it shows that our country is determined to see the European Union change, to move towards more democracy, more protection, more respect for the people of Europe. Tonight, there is hope in France, and it is only just beginning. Through this historically high score that has been given to the Rassemblement National, French people have expressed how attached they are to French identity, to French security, to French sovereignty and French prosperity. Through their support to a Europe of nations, the French people tonight have said that they want to take control of immigration policy. They want the French state to be able to control every square inch of France, defending their jobs, industries, purchasing power, and our farmers. These priorities are those that will be the priorities of the MEPs that will be working alongside me, in line with what Marine Le Pen and our own MPs in France will be doing. There is a never-before-seen gap between the presidential party and the opposition party. This is a clear rejection of the policy that has been implemented by Emmanuel Macron and his government. The President of the French Republic must hear the message that has been sent tonight. First of all, he must no longer push forward with de-indexing pensions, increasing energy prices this summer, our social model, and also the Asylum and Immigration Pact, which will ramp up spreading migrants around the communes in France. Emmanuel Macron tonight is a weakened president, no longer has a parliamentary majority, and no longer has less leverage within the European Parliament. If he does not wish to continue down a cul-de-sac, he must respect the spirit of the institutions. We are asking him to take full measure of this political message, to respect the French people, and to organize legislative elections. This defeat, this never-before-seen defeat from Majority Party marks the end of a cycle and day one of the post-Macron period that we must build together. To the militants of Rassemblement National, I would like to thank you for your support, and to all French people who have honored us through their support, who have given us the responsibility to prepare for the future, I would like to thank you. Myself and Marine Le Pen have ambitions that go well beyond that of a single political party. We wish to bring together all French people who wish to allow France to get back to a place of hope. I would like to invite all French people this evening, no matter where they're from, to join us and to come work with us. The path towards renewal will be a demanding one, but we are ready to lead the nation down that path. Long live the Republic and long live France.
Okay, well, let's go back to the headquarters there where Jordan Bardella was just speaking with our senior reporter, James Andre, who was listening in on that speech. So, James, preparing for the post-Macron era, a pretty clear message there.
Yeah, very clear message. And in fact, what Jordan Bardella has asked is for Emmanuel Macron to dissolve the National Assembly and to hold new elections here in France. So that was indeed quite a strong demand there. And you know, said this to cheers of his militants. But what he really said is, you know, there's a wind of change here in France. This is only the beginning. He said, you know, it's the end of a cycle. He says that the French people have very clearly expressed the fact that they want a change. And he says that, yes, this change, according to him, will come from the National Rally, quite clearly saying that the ambition is to, you know, take the Élysée Palace in the next presidential election. I mean, obviously, the National Rally it's one of the ambitions and it's quite clear. But yes, today what we're seeing is that, yes, they want to leverage this European, you know, victory on the domestic stage here in France. And what he says is that it's a very clear message of rejection of Emmanuel Macron's policies, and that message needs to be heard by the French leader, but also leaders across Europe.
Very interesting, James, and worth saying, just to remind people, that there are 81 seats to be taken here in France. And in fact, we have 720 seats in all. But Armin, we're also getting the second set of results coming in.
That's right. So these are that we saw that the main parties first of all. So in the second set of estimates, we have the Republicans, that's the Conservatives, on 7.2%. So considering that, you know, the Socialists did actually fairly well tonight, that's not a particularly strong performance by the Republicans. Reconquest, the far-right party, which is part of the same political family as the National Rally, 5.5%, so just barely making the threshold. The Greens, though, I think if this is confirmed, this would be a big story, Gavin, because they look to be below the 5% threshold that you need to get seats in the European Parliament. And then, of course, animal welfare and communists not making that 5% as we expected. But I think the Greens is a very interesting result, estimate, I should say, sorry, early predicted result, which is going to be something that we should keep a close eye on.
OK, so a reminder of those results tonight. We're seeing for the National Rally 31.5%, double that of Renew. Emmanuel Macron's party, you can see Valerie Hayer, who is the leader in Europe, 15.2%. There was much speculation, much talk that this may be the reality, the dominant force being the far right for those seats in Europe. It was very close back in 2019, about a percentage point in it, when the National Rally won on about 23%, Socialist 14%, and the far left France Unbowed de France Insoumise 8.7%. As Almond said, the Greens not getting a seat, that is a significant moment. I want to go back to the Renew Party. Let's go to Claire Paquelin. We cut you off earlier. I hope we can go back to the Renew Party HQ now and just get a sense of the mood and what people are saying to you there, Claire.
Well, it's a mixture of relief and disappointment. Relief that Valerie Hayer and her list has not come in third place, but disappointment, there wasn't really much of a difference, and she almost was in third place. Her and the list run by Raphael Glucksmann of the Socialists and his party, Place Publique, they were only just behind them, less than a percentage point difference. And this group, this Renew group, had up until in the last 5 years, there were 23 Renaissance, so this is Emmanuel Macron's party, 23 MEPs were sitting in the European Parliament. Now we're looking at more like 14. So this was expected to a certain extent. We saw that in the polls, Valerie Hayer having a hard time making herself heard, overshadowed to a certain extent by President Emmanuel Macron, but also by his Prime Minister, Gabriel Attal, him being very involved in the campaign the strategy, one imagines, was to try and boost her campaign, but actually it looked in many ways to have the opposite effect because she was overshadowed and found it hard to get her voice heard. So yeah, I would round up the feeling in this room here at the headquarters of Valerie Hayer as a mixture between relief and disappointment.
Claire, thank you. Relief and disappointment tonight, Armin.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, disappointment. But at least the Renew Party of Macron didn't come in third, as Claire Pacalin just told us. So that's something at least. But I'd like to get some reactions on that from our guests, Jean-Yves Camus and Arantxa González-Laya. Perhaps you first, Arantxa. What do you make of what we're seeing from the French estimates so far?
Well, first there is two elections in the European election. There is the debate, how this debate will translate into the European policies, and obviously we have heard none of that for now, and how these European elections play in domestic policies and in domestic political landscape. We've heard all about that. It's all been a national translation for now. But I would say, let's wait and see. I would be watching two things in the results that in the preliminary estimates that we have. I'll be watching to see if the Greens get over the 5%, and I will be watching who is second and who is third in number of seats in the European Parliament, because this is still an open question.
And it is worth saying, this is not the India elections where the polling results are very different from the realities. It are often quite accurate. It's worth saying. Also, just to your sense as an outsider looking in, Arantxa, but with a socialist heart, what you're thinking about Raphael Glucksmann's campaign for the Socialists here in France?
Well, he's done a very positive, very can-do, very solutions-oriented campaign, and maybe this is he's been, for now, from what we can see, kind of rewarded by the voters who have seen in him a solutions-oriented.
Arantxa, speak of the devil. Raphael Glucksmann, the socialist leader, is speaking live.
I would also like to thank the millions and millions of French people who expressed their opinion through these elections, no matter who they are. I'd like to thank the millions of French people who voted for us, for a European ecological power. I would like to thank all of the volunteers who've been part of this campaign based on optimism, joy, enjoyment, the love of Europe, of democracy, of solidarity, of the environment and justice. I would like to tell them that we will live up to that trust. We will fight. We will fight for Europe, a democratic Europe, sovereign Europe, a feminist Europe, a humanist Europe, an environmental Europe, and a social Europe. I am proud of what we've achieved, but I do not feel that we should celebrate. This evening, the far right accounts for 40% in France. Right now, all around Europe, we are seeing a wave, we are witnessing a wave that is shaking the foundations of our institutions. We are at a tipping point, a historic tipping point. War is once again raging on our continent. The far right is leading in a number of European countries. Across our institutions, enemies of Europe are going to set about unmaking our shared treasure that is European democracy. We will fight against them. We will fight them in Europe, and we will fight them in France. So long as we are here, we will go straight to our goals. There will be no European immigration law voted alongside the Rassemblement National. We never play their game. We fight against the far right every day. Our responsibility is now immense, in Europe and in France. Our responsibility is now to fight against that feeling that is spreading, the feeling that the far right's rise to power is inevitable. We will never give over to that. Right now, we are in a situation that no one would have expected at the beginning of the campaign. At this moment, we are in a situation that calls each and every one of us to take a look at history. We have a responsibility now to fight the fight. So we're not here to celebrate. What we're here to do is get ready for the next step. Together, we will work, and work some more. That is what we must do. We must show what this communication-based campaign has not been able to show. By that I mean an alternative, a powerful, enthusiastic, joyful alternative to nationalism. What we will bring to the fore is a new political space. And we'll do this in France and in Europe. This will be based on a visceral attachment to democracy, to freedom, to the environment, to solidarity. And it is that political space that will stop the far right from taking power. This political space is a different way to go about politics. Being open, being honest, being transparent, not allowing lies, not allowing violence. So, this evening we are faced with the beginning of a path. We call on all citizens who believe in equality and solidarity, who believe in the environment, who believe from the bottom of their hearts in the European project. We must call on all of those citizens to join us. We must work together. We must work Europe-wide, and we must get to work here in France. We must continue to foster the hope that was born during this campaign. That is our duty, and that is our life jacket. So I'd like you to see today as a step in a fight that is bigger than each and every one of us. In any case, you can count on me. There will be no single second during which we rest. Democracy is our greatest wealth. Democracy is something that dies when it is not defended, when it is not given life, when it is not supported. For too many decades, we have just benefited from the legacy of democracy, but now, tonight, we need democracies that fight for themselves. We will be democrats who fight. And we will answer those questions. We will answer to the suffering, to the anger that explains and feeds the far-right wave. Words will not be enough. Now we need to act. Each and every one of us needs to get to work, needs to show that France has not given up on the humanist ideal and has not given up on the Republican ideal or indeed the European ideal. We will be the rebirth of that France.
We will be the rebirth of France. So, Raphael Glucksmann, former journalist, former film director, MEP, talking about leading the party of the Socialists in Europe. And really interesting to just put this into comparison for a second, because we have Rassemblement National, the national rally of the far right tonight, 31.5% of the vote. And this is about a victory for the second place. We had Renew, Emmanuel Macron's party, the president, on 15%. Half of that, so a trouncing by the Rassemblement National. And then in third place, the Socialists. Now, I want to go back to Arantxa. A key phrase here used by Raphael Glucksmann, quote, "We are not here to celebrate. We're here for the next step." Yeah. About clinging on right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's putting the alternative to what Bardella has put to France. He's putting the alternative, and he's been very clear about what the alternative could be in a very sobering way. I think this is the right thing to do at this precise moment in time. I don't think it's a question to celebrate, given the numbers. It's a question to put what the alternative would be in Europe. And obviously, both of them are looking not just at Europe, but they are also looking at what the choice would be for the next election, next presidential election in this country, in France.
And Jean-Yves Camus, did you get the impression that Glucksmann was not only setting himself up as an alternative to the far right, but also to Macron to some extent? Or what was your read on that?
My read is that, of course, he is telling the French that he is an alternative to both the president and to the extreme right. But what strikes me is that he has some reasons to celebrate, given that he started from quite a low point at the start of the campaign. He achieved more than 14%, so that's a pretty good result. And nevertheless, he seems to be very much worried. Very much worried about the fact that the National Rally has been around for more than 50 years now, and he says we need to fight the National Rally. That's okay. But he also probably thinks, what is the solution? Because we have seen this party rise and rise and rise, election after election, all kinds of elections. And we still do not have the capacity to stop it. I mean, we didn't find the, I would say, the political hardware that's able to stop this rise. And this is very worrying. I do not mean that the outcome of a presidential election would be the same. It's totally different, two totally distinct elections, but nevertheless, 31% is huge.
Yeah. Mark, you're listening to that. Just to zone out a second. You've followed French European election results over the years. Just give us what are the notable things here for you, going past over the decade or more, and how it's fragmented itself and how it looks tonight?
Well, clearly, let's remind our viewers that the National Rally has won the last 3 European elections. It won in 2014. It won barely, but it still won the last time around. And tonight, they triumphed. So obviously, there's a difference of scale. But as Camille was saying, the National Rally has been doing very well in those elections. And it's now doing very well in national elections and even local elections, which shows that the party is now really part of French politics. It was a French party, now it's clearly front and center, and it's very interesting to see its leader openly defy Emmanuel Macron, saying, after such a drubbing, there's only one thing you can do: call for snap elections. Just call for elections, and we are going to probably listen to the response of Emmanuel Macron. I just want to highlight that it's very unusual for the president to speak out on election night, because he was obviously not running. His prime minister was not running. It also shows that they chose someone, Valerie Hayer. They probably felt that she's not up to the job. Too late for that. But clearly, this is a very, very important moment in French politics.
Mark, I just want to comment on this slide that we have. So it's actually now 5.2% estimated for the Greens. So we have to recalibrate what we said earlier about the Greens possibly losing their...
Let's go straight to the LFI, the La France Insoumise, France Unbowed Party. Manon Aubry, its leader in Europe, is speaking now.
The shared list proposed by NUPES. They opened the gate to the far right. But tonight, we have not given up. The fantastic campaign that we undertook together enabled us, indeed, to push back on the abstention rate in many places and many parts of society, especially young people who turned out to vote. Especially young people and the poorest areas, and every time they turn out to vote, we will push back the far right. We are fighting for the young people in this country. Right now, preliminary results show that we are up versus 2019, when we received 6% of the vote. Tonight, we are stronger than we were in 2019, and in the future, tomorrow in the European Parliament, we will have more MEPs to fight for purchasing power, for peace in Gaza, and to protect our jobs. Some people would have preferred that we simply disappeared from these elections, but we are still here. And I want to tell the millions of people who voted for us tonight that we will still be here tomorrow. This result is the result of a full campaign on purchasing power, on jobs, on agriculture, and also a campaign for a ceasefire in Gaza. This campaign was waged together. We fought together in a positive way. A positive way because we thought of the future of young people.
OK, so fourth place, the France Insoumise, talking about how they are still there, they are still in the mix, and they are representing the people. You saw, and we heard from Vedeka a short while ago, Vedeka Bahel at the party headquarters, talking about the pro-Palestinian movement, and support there was key to that. Arantxa and Jean-Yves, I want to get both of your thoughts, first of all, on the far left here in France. And do you see this as a key moment for them? Clearly, you talked about the Greens a moment ago and saying, actually, we might see them without a seat. Where do you see the far left right now?
No, I mean, first on the Greens, because the Greens are not on the far left. The Greens in France are a separate political force from the Social Democrats. In my own country, the Greens are mostly integrated within the Social Democrat
In fact, many countries you have often like alliances.
Correct.
The Netherlands at the moment,
Correct.
both together, yeah.
So one of the lessons from these figures that we are looking is that had the two gone together to this election, the result would have been better. So there is also a bit of a lesson to learn from the figures that are on the table. And I mean, what I take from what we've been hearing is that there is a very clear narrative on the extremes, especially on the extreme right. The message is very clear, but there is also an alternative to that, which is equally clear and which is also on the table now. And it's possible, and we are seeing other countries, we are just seeing what's happening in Finland, for example, where the extreme right party has lost a tremendous political space because there is another party, more centrist, whether it's Christian Democrat or Social Democrat, that is making this alternative pitch. At a time when citizens are a little bit under a lot of pressure because the sequence of crises that citizens have had to face in those last 5 years has been phenomenal. So I think the next period will be, there is two options on the table: nationalist solutions or more European solutions, and let the European citizens decide.
Okay, well, let's go to back to party headquarters where Manon Aubry was speaking just a few moments ago, the head of the far-left Unbowed France party, which has done better than it did in the 2019 election. And Verica Bahel was listening to that speech. So quite an energetic and buoyant atmosphere, it seemed like, Verica. How was it over there?
Yes, Armin, it's pretty lively. I hope you can hear me behind all the chanting, but there was absolutely an explosion of joy here at the France Unbowed Party headquarters when those projections came out. Manon Aubry has just finished speaking, and as you can hear, her supporters are in full force, thrilled with that news. Well, she took aim at President Macron's politics in her speech there, saying that tonight shows a defeat of his values, and said that it's now evident that the country wants to turn the page on the Macron era. She thanked her supporters and her party for a formidable campaign. That's what she said, saying that every time we mobilise, we get it done, and that now we will be numerous in the European Parliament. And there was huge screams of support when she made her stance very clear on calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, and how that must be, that remains a key tenet of this party. And she also ended by thanking everybody for voting for youth. But there's absolutely a sense of vibrancy here. Last election back in 2019, France Unbowed had about 6.3% of the seats. It's just under 9% now. So it is a bump for them. It is seen as a success, and it really, you can see that vibrancy and that joy here at the party headquarters.
Thank you. I just want to mention another point. Verica, thank you. I want to talk about something first with Jean-Yves Camus and get your thoughts straight after Mark, which is we are in a scenario where for every year for the last few elections, over the last decade and more now, we've seen a shrinking of the centre, still a dominant force. And it's the EPP, the centre-right, that have been the big party. And in France, we're seeing a real disappearance of their centre-right, and particularly when you look at the Conservatives. What's your take there?
That's a very big problem in this country. I mean, we used to have a mainstream conservative right, which was strong, a party which was in power for many years, and they have lost votes both to the presidential party since 2017, and they seem to lose votes to the National Rally. The polls said before the elections that 1 out of 5 voters, out of 5 conservative voters would cast his vote for Bardella, which is really huge. What I do not understand is why this country does not have a strong mainstream conservative party, because obviously that's part of the solution. If you want to stop the extremes, that's part of the solution. Is it lack of leadership? Is it the fact that this party is only an apparatus? I mean, they still hold many cities, regional councils, but I mean, when it comes to national politics, it seems that they are, I mean, not a marginal force, but I mean, at 7%, you obviously do not represent much. So they have many reasons to, I mean, think about that and maybe renew both their leadership and also the way they look at the extreme right. Try to, I mean, dissociate themselves from the National Rally and not seem to run after the policies of the National Rally.
Mark, where have they gone? Have they all gone to the far right? Where are they going to?
Well, probably the assumption was that some of them went to Emmanuel Macron, when he was elected and the last European election, and the rest went to the far right. I mean, if you add up the results of the far right in the 2019 European elections, you had 27.5%. Tonight, it's 37%. So 10 more %, and most of them probably came from the Conservative Party. François-Xavier Bellamy, who was already the head of the list back in 2019, according to everyone, he did a good job at the European Parliament, a serious campaign. He probably campaigned better than last time. End result, he performed worse than last time. So they had 8.5%, now projected result 7.2% after a drubbing at the last presidential election. So there is a major crisis of the Conservative Party. Now there's a glimmer of hope on the other side, the mainstream party, the Socialist. There's a glimmer of hope because they scored 14%. When they scored 14% in the 2014 election, it was considered a major defeat by then President François Hollande. So it tells you how you measure things very differently.
And Mark, Reconquest, so that is on 5.5% at the moment in estimates, that does contain some former mainstream conservative voters, aren't they? I mean, they actually have a sort of something in common, some of them, with Éric Zemmour.
Well, clearly the ideology is very similar to the National Rally. The biggest difference being that they're maybe even more extreme when it comes to immigration, Islam, and so on, but they're more mainstream when it comes to the economy. They're much more free market oriented. So this could appeal to voters on the right who actually are hardening on immigration, Islam, terrorism, and so on and so forth, but do feel that, you know, lowering taxes is a better option. This is what Reconquête offered them. They were also on the brink of the 5%, according to our estimates. They managed to survive. This was really survival for them because Éric Zemmour, who was their leader at the presidential election, didn't perform as well. And if they didn't make the 5% cut tonight, they probably would have shut the party or merged with another one.
Mark, thank you. Let's get a comparison, just bring you up to date. Then and now, here's Catalina.
Then and now, Gavin, let's compare results between the last elections in 2019 and now. 6 parties in France in 2019 received a score greater than 5%, which is necessary to send representatives to the European Parliament. Here are the final results from the Ministry of Interior of 2019. In first position, Marine Le Pen's and Bardela's National Rally with 23% of the vote, as they have been winning the European election in the past 3 years. In second position in the ballot, Macron's Renaissance, formerly known as La République En Marche, with 22.42% of the votes. Coming in third place, the Europe Écologie, France's Green Party, with 13.48% of the votes. Then we see number 4, 5, and 6, who scored above 5%, Républicain, La France Insoumise, and the Socialist Party and Place Publique. Then here are the seats that were won in the French parties for the European Parliament in 2019. Let's take a look at that graph, where we could see that tied in with National Rally and La République En Marche, or Renaissance, with 23 seats in the European Parliament. These results are after Brexit. Then comes the Green Party with 13 seats in the European Parliament. These were the parties with the majority of seats in the European Parliament in 2019. Now, 2024, the preliminary results that we have during this year's elections. Here's 2019. We'll compare, as predicted, Jordan Bardella and Marine Le Pen's National Rally, scoring major gains in seats in the European Parliament, winning 31.5% of the vote this year. While Macron's centrist Renaissance Party, as predicted as well, lost seats and votes in the European elections, with a 15.2% of the vote here in France. And then falling behind and almost tied with Macron's Renaissance Party in third place, the Socialists, with 14%, then the far left with 8.7%, and falling slightly behind at 5.2%, the Greens. So these were the 5 parties so far that get about 5% of the vote necessary to send representatives into the European Parliament, turning a page, it seems, into the Macron era here in France.
Catalina, thank you. It is a busy evening, musical chairs tonight, a big soiree, lots of guests coming in. We're going to say thank you to Arantxa. Before you go, we can't not say goodbye, because I know you have to go elsewhere, but a word tonight, what you're expecting from Spain and your old government as former foreign minister there, what you're hoping for or worried about.
So I think the results are, the trend is towards a slight win of the Conservatives, but not a major, not a major earthquake. Basically, the Conservatives are consolidating the former votes of the Liberals that have disappeared. They've now consolidated in a one force. Conservatives pretty neck to neck with the Social Democrats. I'll be watching with a lot of attention what's happening in Catalonia, because remember, we still got a government in Catalonia to compose, and what it looks like is the independentist forces, especially that of Puigdemont, is not trending very well. Let's look at those results in a moment.
So Carles Puigdemont, former Catalan president, somewhere in exile. We think he's in the Pyrenees at the moment. He may be coming back. An amnesty agreed. Is this a referendum on Pedro Sanchez?
Well, I think the Conservatives have tried to make this a referendum on Pedro Sanchez, which is always a very difficult thing to do, is a bit of a gamble, because if they did so, the results are not really showing that Pedro Sanchez lost the referendum.
Arantxa, great to talk to you. I think he has one of the most favourable nicknames in Europe. They call him Señor Guapo, Mr. Handsome. Arantxa González-Leia, great, and have a great evening tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much to Arantxa González-Leia. I just want to bring you a couple of very quick bits of reactions that we're getting, as we've been talking a lot about the situation in France. The head of the Republicans, the Conservative Party, the lead candidate here, saying this result is the start of a very long journey to revive the right. So I think a sort of a reading between the lines, clearly he's not having a great night. And Marie Toussaint, the lead candidate for the ecologists, or the Greens as they used to be, she says this is a bitter defeat which opens the door to all kinds of risks. So that was from Marie Toussaint there. Although we should say they're now projected to have more than 5%, so they should be in the European Parliament. Let's go to Claire Pacalin, who is our reporter at the headquarters of Renaissance, the party of Emmanuel Macron. And Claire, you're standing by with a guest, I believe.
I'm standing here with Shannon Seban. You were 25th on the list of Valerie Hayer's list. Remember, of course, of Emmanuel Macron's party, Renaissance. You said to me you didn't think you had much chance of winning, and tonight you haven't become a member of the European Parliament because only 14 seats were won by that list. But you still campaigned hard. Tell me, why did you campaign so hard, even though you knew that you had very little chance of winning tonight?
Because actually, when I saw the first polls, when they wanted to run for the European election, I saw that the extreme right and in the polls, the extreme right was very high, and at the beginning of my political commitment, there is a fight against extreme right, and I cannot admit that in my country and at a European level now the extreme right was so high. So that's why it was really important for me to run in this campaign, to run for the European Parliament, and to try to convince French people that we need Europe in our daily life. You know, when I wanted to commit in politics and to be elected, that's why, because of Emmanuel Macron. Because our president is a pro-European. Because Valerie Hayer, our candidate, is deeply pro-European. That's why I wanted to commit in this political campaign. Of course, tonight the result is not satisfying, but it's not something that I would like to complain about. I would like to move on now. Of course, we have to listen what French people want to tell by voting today and with this result. But now we need to move on. You know, renunciation is not in the DNA of our political party. We need to listen to French people, but now we need to move on collectively. And I cannot admit at all that the extreme right is so high in our country and at the European level.
We're seeing Jordan Bardella getting more than a third of the vote tonight.
Yeah.
What went wrong in Valerie Hayer's campaign? She's got fewer seats than the party got in 2019.
Yeah.
What went wrong and what could have gone better?
You know, in this election, you have some political parties that have decided to make this campaign speaking about national subjects. When I see La France Insoumise, they spoke about the conflict between Israel and Gaza. And when I saw, like, Jordan Bardella and the extreme right, they only speak about national topics. They don't want to settle and to be in Europe. This is what I would like French people to understand, that now that Jordan Bardella has more than 30 seats at the European Parliament, that means that the French voice at the European Parliament will be more important. And this is something that we must all complain about. And I am deeply convinced that now that we have about like 14 seats, according to the first polls and estimations, we will need to work even harder in order to be able that the French voice will be listened at the European Parliament.
What are you going to do, and are you optimistic?
I am deeply optimistic because French President Emmanuel Macron is a pro-European, and in our political party, the DNA is always to listen to French people and to try to answer to their concern. So, of course, we need to admit that the score tonight is a huge disappointment for our political party, and that there is like a signal which is sent to the President Emmanuel Macron. So we need to listen to this concern, and now we need to act. So, of course, we need to move on like in a different way. We cannot move on like as if Jordan Bardella scores was not so high.
So this is a wake-up call in a way. Do you think that President Emmanuel Macron, and even more so his Prime Minister Gabriel Attal, overshadowed Valerie Hayer during her campaign?
Not at all. And some media has asked me the question before. Valerie Hayer was on all our like paper, and she participated to a lot of debates during this campaign. She was, you know, a lot of people try to understand why do the President Emmanuel Macron and the Prime Minister Gabriel Attal were so involved in this campaign. Because as Emmanuel Macron told, the hour is really dangerous for us. I mean, Europe is not something which is granted. We need to fight for Europe. And that's why because war is our continent, that's why we needed to have the political all the political members.
I need to go back to the studio now. Shannon Seban, thank you so much for your time. Shannon Seban, thank you very much.
Claire, thank you. We are getting results through, the early predicted results for the European Parliament as a whole. We're going to give them to you in a moment. First of all, I want to go to the National Rally headquarters. Let's see what's going on there right now. Oh, in fact, we can see the European Parliament breakdown. So, this is a significant moment. We are seeing the European People's Party, the biggest party, the centre-right, Conservatives, 181 seats. That is up from 176 seats in the Parliament as of 2019. And then we go to the second biggest groups, the Socialists and Democrats. They are down from 2019, from 139 seats to 135. We have Renew Europe of Emmanuel Macron and the wider centrists and liberals in Europe. They are down as well to 82, 102 seats they had back in 2019. Now let's go across first to the left, 34, down from 37. And now we look at the hard right and the far right. So, European Conservatives and Reformists up by 2 seats from 69 in 2019 to 71. Here's the group with Marine Le Pen and those like Geert Wilders on the far right from 49 seats in 2019 up to 62 seats. So, a bigger force as predicted, and the non-aligned, which does include some hard right as well, the likes of Fidesz party in Hungary, from 51 seats now. They did have 61 seats back in 2019, so a drop of 10 seats there.
Yeah, and as we thought, Gavin, quite a significant drop for the Greens on the last European Parliament. That's, of course, being confirmed by results by partial results in France. But let's go now to National Rally headquarters, where Fabrice Leggeri is there. He is one of the top candidates on the list for the National Rally in this European election. So your reactions, Mr. Leggeri, to this partial result?
Yes, good evening. My first reaction is that the result is very clear. It's crystal clear that French citizens reject the current policies implemented by the European Union and by Macron's government, but French citizens have also expressed hope that the policies implemented in Europe and France could change soon. So this is also a trust in the Rassemblement National, which means that we have to be very modest because we cannot disappoint French citizens. So that's my first reaction.
Fabrice, you caused some consternation amongst other parties, a former Frontex officer working for the heart of the EU in the past. I would like to know your sense of the dynamic at this point. There is talk of Marine Le Pen wanting to see a super group on the far right emerging, a new name between the European Conservatives Reformists and the Identity and Democracy group, trying to pull in allure Giorgia Meloni. What do you want to see Europe-wide in these elections?
Well, actually, what we know is that in many other European countries, political parties which are close to ours, close to Rassemblement National, have scored very high, so they have very good results, which means that there is expectation in Europe, across Europe, that free nations can cooperate together, that we can have less bureaucracy, more freedom, less European Commission, and that there are specific topics such as migration, the Green Deal, but also energy policy, and in general economic development. These are the topics that matter for European citizens, and these are policies where we can, Rassemblement National and other political parties in the European Parliament, we can cooperate together. So we will see if there is in the future one big group or if there are different groups. But anyway, what is for sure is that we can vote together and we can have very likely a kind of power to block the most toxic policies that we want to block from the European Commission in the future.
A lot of those in the centre-right believe your policies are toxic and divisive. I mean, just give me your sense of how you see yourselves. Briefly, we have about a minute to talk to you on this, but are you going to be a disruptor within Europe, working within the system, or do you want to see, wide-scale changes? What is it at the heart of what you want to change? I guess the migration policy.
What we want to change is, of course, the migration policy, because for the time being, what we see, and I have witnessed myself, is that the European Commission wanted simply to let the borders in, and saying that anyway we need to legalize illegal immigration, because this is the result of the Asylum and Migration Pact. But we also want to change the Green Deal, because what we see is that French citizens, but also European citizens in other countries, they suffer. And what we see also is that Europe is lagging behind if we compare Europe to the United States, to other countries. For example, the ban of combustion engine by 2035. So this is beneficial to Chinese car industry, and we want a Europe that can serve the European interest, and of course we want to serve the interest of French citizens. So I think that these are the areas. It's not limited to migration, it's also about economics, it's also about this kind of punishment that we are suffering from when we have the Green Deal in place. So these are only some topics where, for sure, we can have a huge alliance in Europe.
Okay, thank you so much, Fabrice Legerian. Let's come back quickly to Jean-Yves Camus, our expert in the studio, who has to leave, unfortunately. But just very briefly, Jean-Yves, what's your impression of the whole European Parliament as it's looking to you today? There is a rightward shift, isn't there, overall?
There is a rightward shift. The centre bloc retains the majority. But I mean, in 2004, when Europe opened the door to the countries of Eastern Europe, I do not think that the people in charge had foreseen that today the most important political people in Europe would be Mrs. Meloni and Mr. Orban, and the Polish Conservatives and the National Rally. So it's really a big shift. You know, there was a time after the Second World War when the mainstream conservative
Sorry
right...
to interrupt, we're going straight to the French President. Thank you for joining us. Here's Emmanuel Macron tonight.
Today you were called upon to vote in the European elections in mainland France, its overseas territories and abroad. The lesson here is clear. This is not a good result for the party that supports Europe, including the majority party. Far-right parties over the last years have been opposed to all sorts of progress brought about by Europe, protecting our borders, supporting our farmers, supporting Ukraine. These parties have gained ground across the continent. In France, they are at nearly 40% of cast votes. I have always believed that Europe, united and strong, is a good thing for France. This is a situation that is a concern for me. Demagogues and nationalists on the rise is bad for our nation, it's bad for Europe, and it is bad for the place of France in Europe and in the world. And I say this at the very time that we just celebrated with the entire world D-Day in Normandy, and in a very short time we will be hosting the rest of the world for the Olympic and Paralympic Games. Yes, the far right is bad for the French people and for the French nation. At the end of the day, I was not able to just pretend nothing has happened. There is a feverish tone in the political debate in our country recently. Chaos that is a concern to you, it's shocking to you, and I will not give it any ground. Right now, the challenges that we face, external threats, climate change and its consequences, and threats against our own unity, these threats require being clear in our debates. We need to be ambitious for our country, and we need to respect every French person. This is why, after consulting the relevant parties in line with the 12th article of our Constitution, I have decided to give you again the choice of our parliamentary future through the vote. Tonight, I am dissolving the Assemblée Nationale. In just a few minutes, I will be signing the decree that will call the French people on the 30th of June to legislative elections on the 7th of July for the second round. This is a grave and heavy decision. But it is a decision full of trust. I trust you, my fellow citizens. I trust in the French people's ability to make the right choice for itself and for future generations. I trust in our democracy. I wish to give the vote to the French people. That is the Republican spirit. This is far better than any arrangements. We need to cut through the chaos. I trust in France. France has always known how to come together faced with difficult circumstances, to unite rather than retreating and relying on demagogues. In the coming days, I will be speaking about the future of the nation. I have heard your message, I've heard your concerns, and I will give answers. The future, uniting, going forward, will continue to be driving forces in this political project. Today is a democratic reckoning. I am the only political leader to have no need to run for office in 2027. So I wish you to be sure of one thing. My only ambition is to be useful to this country that we all love. My calling is to serve you. I know that I can count on you voting on the 30th and the 7th. France needs a clear majority to act together. Being French means to live up to the necessity of the times, knowing what is behind a vote, acting responsibly no matter what. What I mean by that is writing history rather than being the victim of history. The time is now. Long live the Republic. Long live France.
Okay, so this is a bombshell of news. This is a historic moment. Let's just recap what Emmanuel Macron has said. He said, quote, "The rise of nationalists is a danger for our nation, Europe." He went on to talk about how I cannot pretend nothing has happened. He then said, "I've decided to call snap elections," and with it, he has dissolved the National Assembly. I want to briefly introduce the guests who we're delighted to have in the studio with us. Fabienne Keller, who is from the Renew Party, former Strasbourg mayor. We also have Thomas Pellerin-Carlin, a candidate for the Socialist Party, with a new seat with the Socialists tonight in Parliament. We also have Jean-Claude Trichet, French economist, part of the former president of the European Central Bank. Marc Pellerin is with us, our France Affairs analyst. Start with you, because Fabienne, as we heard from Emmanuel Macron a moment ago, you took a sharp intake of breath. That was big news.
Yes, it was one hypothesis that was discussed about due to the fact that our National Assembly is blocked, has very strong difficulties in deciding, in voting laws, and it's of course important for the country to be able to decide, to have a majority. The deception of the president concerning the results of the election has been explained by him. So it's his decision. I think he's profoundly, breathing with France and thinking about the future of our country. This decision was taken with previous thoughts. He has probably discussed with his closer councillors. So I think it's an important moment for France.
But Fabienne Keller, do you think it's the right decision or not? Because some people are going to say this is just giving victory to the national rally, or at least giving them the opportunity to build on the momentum from this European election by doing that.
It's never, it's always the right way to do when you are in difficulties, to give the voice to people. This is a basic principle of democracy. Of course, as you say, the situation is particular because the results of the le Rassemblement National is high, of extreme right even more because of the list of Reconquête. But the people in a democracy are always right. And we will see on a national basis that it is more, directly connected to people if the vote remains the same. And I don't know when those elections are going to take place, but probably, very important debate.
June 30th and July 7th. So it's very
June 30th and July 7th. But the people are then, it's the direct election of people who have to explain what they are going to do to their citizens. Something where we are really lacking in the European election, where it's at the national level. So it's an impossible direct debate with people. For the deputy in the National Assembly, it's much more on a local council basis. So I hope it will, make it possible for people to discuss their difficulties, because I could see that during the campaign, people are feeling that they are in great difficulties, and hopefully choose a reasonable National Assembly at the end.
Thomas, from the Socialist Party, I mentioned at the start, with a new seat, but listening to that news, we felt in this room that it was surprising to suddenly call that. Tell me what you think the factors at play are here. What's causing so many people, even in bigger numbers, at the European elections to go for the far right?
Just to clarify one thing, so I'm not a member of the Socialist Party, I'm a member of Place Publique, which is the party, the coalition, yes. Just to be clear.
The party of Raphael Glucksmann within the...
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, European elections are about Europe. And what Macron has been doing for several months is to nationalize that election. And he's just done that again in a way that we'll see what happens. But maybe in the future we'll see that it was a bit reckless, to say the least. Emmanuel Macron has been making gift to the far right at least since December, since the migration law that he did pass with the support of the Rassemblement National. And just a few minutes ago, he gave to the Rassemblement National what they've been asking for, which is a snap election. So that's, I mean, he's the president, he was elected, that's his choice. Now we're facing a responsibility both in France and in Europe, which is to make sure that the far right does not come back in power. I mean, they were kicked out of power all over Europe 8 years ago. They should never be coming back. And we've been seeing the centrists making alliances with them time and again, in Flanders, in Sweden, in Finland, and in the Netherlands. And I mean, more than ever, now is the time to fight the far right night and day, every day of the week, to kick them out of power.
And yet the Rassemblement National, the National Rally, say, we don't use the F word, fascist. We've kicked out the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, from the Identity and Democracy. They call themselves a party representing the people. They talk about migration, but they're trying to clearly shift themselves away of the father of Marine Le Pen and the family legacy that they clearly have.
Sure. I mean, the far right have had a capacity to deceive people for a very long time. I mean, in political science, because I'm a researcher first and foremost, we call that a catch-all party. They're going to say whatever they want, and then they're going to do something else. I mean, Marine Le Pen, a few years ago, wanted to leave the Eurozone. Now she wants to stay in it. I think it was 2 months ago, Marine Le Pen wanted to leave the European energy market. Jordan Bardella changed his mind. I mean, those are major things. And they're just, changing their mind, on a whim, depending on the opinion poll. So obviously, when you have a party that is dishonest and that, has the capacity to deceive people, I mean, it's easier to fool a few electors, of which, they care very little about them. But those electors of the Rassemblement National, a lot of them are angry. There are good reasons to be angry, especially today. And we, Social Democrats, as we did in the past, need to be able to come up with a project. We need to be able to listen to the people and to be the alternative to the far right, like we were decades ago and like we are today.
And Jean-Claude Trichet, how surprised are you by this decision to hold an early election?
I am amazed, absolutely amazed. And I have to say that what I don't know exactly what's behind. I hope very much that the president thinks that with the shock of this European election, the campaign, which is extraordinarily short now, I understand it's a matter of 3 weeks before the first round of this election, will be extraordinarily active, dynamic, with the idea that his own party, which has been deeply touched, hit on this election, will regain the energy which is necessary, perhaps together with others that are in the Republican side, if I may, in order for the Republicans, quote unquote, to win the next legislative election. We'll see what happens. I hope it is not the idea that we will put in power the extreme right in order for them to prove that they are incapable to govern. I cannot imagine that it is the tactics. So I hope very much that my first assumption is the right one.
I think you've encapsulated the size of the moment, the gamble that Emmanuel Macron's taking, and the shock within the studio that we all sensed, the surprise moment. Let's go to the headquarters of the Renaissance Party, and let's talk to Claire Paquelin. Claire, since that moment, just tell us how many people that's caught by surprise.
There were gasps in the room when Emmanuel Macron announced that he was dissolving Parliament and that fresh elections would take place on the 30th of June for the first round, the 7th of July for the second. Well, that's just around the corner. I've been speaking to people in the room here telling me that they're now going to have to go out and start campaigning, and they don't have all that much time to do it. And no, people I've been speaking to were not expecting this. They did tell me that when they heard, and we all heard a little earlier on in the evening, that Emmanuel Macron would be speaking tonight, they were expecting something. Because first of all, to give you some context, it's very rare for a French president to speak on the night, on the evening of European elections. So the fact that he was going to speak, people started saying, well, maybe he's going to say something. But dissolving Parliament, that really caught the room by surprise here.
Claire, thank you. I just want to step back a second. We've had this moment where we're talking about the dissolution of Parliament, these snap elections. Mark Perelman, what does that mean? What are we going to see change now? What's up for grabs?
Everything is up for grabs. I mean, we had 2 earthquakes tonight. One was expected, the National Rally trouncing all the other parties, getting double the votes of the following parties. And we had an inkling when we learned just before 8 that the president would address the French. That doesn't happen on election night. So we probably thought something was up, that maybe there would be an alliance in Parliament with the Conservatives who scored badly. So maybe, but this clearly is really a big surprise, really a major shock. It doesn't happen very often in French politics. The last time around was 1997. Was his last century. Jacques Chirac, he called for snap elections because he thought he would gain a stronger majority. Well, he made a big mistake because he lost that majority and had to live with a socialist prime minister. Emmanuel Macron is also answering directly what Jordan Bardella has said, the leader of the National Rally, has said for weeks, and said a few minutes before the address of the French president, we are now calling on you, Mr. Macron, to dissolve the National Assembly, to listen what the French said tonight. And the president said, well, I've heard what the French said tonight, I'm dissolving the National Assembly.
So, Mark, there's a real possibility then that Macron could end up as a kind of lame duck president if this election goes wrong. And there's not much time to turn things around.
Well, he hinted to that. He said, well, you know, I don't have any elections until 2017, and we might have a new prime minister. So.
Mark, let's go straight to the National Rally headquarters. Here's Marine Le Pen.
In the position of main opposition party, we are now the major party for change. We are ready to take power if the French people trust us with the upcoming legislative elections. We are ready to rebuild the country. We are ready to defend the interests of the French people. We are ready to end mass migration. We are ready to make purchasing power a priority. We are ready to reindustrialize the country. In a nutshell, we are ready to rebuild the country. We are ready to bring France back to life. The message tonight, including through the dissolution of the Parliament, is also a message sent to the leaders in Brussels. This is a patriotic movement that is a historic one. We are seeing the return of nations, of protection around the world. We are one people and wish to remain so. We are closing the globalist parenthesis, which has led to so much suffering around the world. We are starting to see the dawn of a new day for all nations and people in Europe. We are optimistic and we will treat this responsibly. We're seeing here those French qualities that will be so necessary as we rebuild the country. Emmanuel Macron is calling French people back to the voting booths, and I would like to call on the French people to join us to build a majority around the Rassemblement National for the single most important cause, France.
Okay, so we've just heard from Marine Le Pen of the National Rally, Fabienne Keller from the Renew Party. I would like your thoughts, first of all, on the speech to say, bring it on. Essentially a bluff, a double bluff called back by President Macron. And as Mark said a moment ago, this is a real gamble moment. Do you agree?
It's not a gamble or a bluff moment. It's a serious moment for democracy. I think that the president was really shocked and impressed by the results of impressed in the sense he was not expecting extreme right that high, even though it was in the polls, but in reality. And he considers in his responsibility that it's necessary in a democratic country to give the voice to the people, the citizens again. Of course.
But to Mark's point that this is a risk of bringing in a bigger vote for the National Rally.
I don't know. I must say the information is very recent. we have to think a little bit about what the consequences are. But as I said, the people are going to choose somebody to represent them, 580 people. So that's representing the country, probably discussing on what people are worried about, that is their situation. What was very difficult in this European campaign is that we did not speak about European issues. We only spoke about national issues because the Rassemblement National and other parties brought always the subjects to that, which is a problem when you don't discuss about what you are voting for. But then here the discussion will be clear. Is it really what you want? And again, it's going to reflect what the democracy at what stage it is.
But you say that's the problem. Now, is that the problem that Emmanuel Macron put up Valerie Hayer and not somebody as a significant figure, perhaps himself, like we saw in Italy with Giorgia Meloni, and say, I'll do this, I'll put forward what matters for Europe. Let's whether we not make it about me as a referendum as a president, let's put in a figure that really talks the talk on Europe. Is that a mistake by Renew?
I would not say that. Valérie was a very strong candidate. She had every other candidates against her. There was quite a lot of macho remarks, saying that she was thin and not speaking loud enough, and that's not acceptable in politics. We have to change the way people behave. And the President Macron talked about Europe. He made a speech at La Sorbonne, presenting his strategy concerning the defense aspects of military defense, but also cyber defense, but also defense against interferences. Yeah. Thank you. And the issue of frontiers, so very sovereign issue at the European level. I think he did his job. He's part of the job that is, giving the objective, the strategy. So I would not consider that the way the list was built is a subject. Valérie is president of the Renew Group. She's not only president of the French Liberals, she's also president of the 25 national delegation of Liberals. So she is not very well known in France, but she is the right person in that election.
Okay, let's go back to the headquarters of the National Rally, because we have a guest waiting for us, Raphaël Audois from the Identity and Democracy Foundation, who can join us now. Raphaël Audois, thank you for being our guest tonight. Just firstly, your reactions to what you heard from Marine Le Pen, the president of the National Rally Group in the French Parliament, and how you see the results across Europe tonight for Identity and Democracy.
We see that this election is a huge victory for our political family. We see that in France, Rassemblement National is the first political party right now. It's the same in other countries, like for example in Austria, when our allies from the FPO is now the first party in Austria. We also see an increase of the patriotic and conservative values and parties in all Europe. I can think about Greece, I can think about Croatia. So in all Europe we see an increase of our political family. And we see that voting for us is efficient because, for example, in France, one victory of the Rassemblement National, one victory of the Patriots, and now Emmanuel Macron rediscovered what is democracy. So voting for us is efficient because it shows to the liberal, to the center left and center right, what is democracy. And so, yes, it's a huge victory for our political family.
And Raphaël Audois, what about the idea of this super group of the different far-right forces coming together? Who do you see as being part of that, and what do you think is realistic?
I think that we saw during the last legislature that political parties from both ECR and ID, the Conservatives and the Patriots, we work together more and more. We learned to know each other more and more, and so there will be a cooperation between all political parties from the right, from the Conservative and Patriots right, patriotic right. We will see if there will be one big group or a cooperation between the ECR and the ID group, but in the end of the day there will be a cooperation between all parties from the patriotic and the conservative family. And we already saw during the last legislature that from some vote, for example, about the green policy, the EPP need the vote from ECR and ID and discuss with us to obtain majority or to block some texts from the left and the liberals. And it will be more and more the case, and there will be more and more cooperation between our political parties in both ECR and ID.
Raphael, the dynamic is fascinating behind you. We were there maybe half an hour ago before the speech, and we saw celebrations, partying. Now I can hear a lot of talk, the TV's on, Emmanuel Macron on in the background. Just talk us through the atmosphere when that announcement was made amongst the National Rally MPs and delegates while they were watching.
Yes, of course, people are celebrating this victory, and for us, it's a reward. It shows that all our work, all our fights are recognized by our people. People in France know so that the political alternative, the political opposition to Emmanuel Macron is the Rassemblement National, and it's the case in more and more countries in Europe. So yes, of course, people are celebrating this victory and are ready to fight for the next general election in France.
Okay, Raphael Audieu, thank you from RN headquarters. Fabienne Keller, so what you heard him say there about cooperation between the ID and the ECR, when you look at Ukraine and a lot of other issues, these are not very compatible forces, are they, actually?
No, they are not, because Poland, for example, the peace, a very important part of the ECR group. I don't know exactly how many there are going to be, but probably something like 15. They are really asking for help for Ukraine, their neighbor. And they know perfectly well the Russian friendship between Marine Le Pen and Mr. Putin. As you know, the Russian government financed LR party, and for example, Mr. Marini is very well known as a big friend of Russia, taking regularly public positions close to Russia.
Did you mean the RN rather than LR?
The
yes.
RN, sorry.
RN, allegedly
sorry.
financed them because
the
I don't think it was
Rassemblement National, the French far
yes.
right. So, yes, it's incompatible. It's interesting to see the director of the Rassemblement National is already showing us that they are going to cooperate and not be a global group. But of course, Mrs. Le Pen had to look for additional forces because she had a big ally that was Salvini, but his number of MEPs is going to decrease sharply. So this is why she was very positive concerning the grouping of the two, ID and ECR, but it's not going to happen.
And also, this is a big moment for you as well in the room. Your life for the next few days and weeks is going to change. Your ordinary day in office, back to Strasbourg, or MPs with holiday plans suddenly change. You're going to go, as of, well, when you leave the studio very shortly, into campaign mode.
Yes, of course. We are going to help our colleagues of the majority, the presidential majority, as we did for the European campaign. We're just going to keep up the pace and go to discuss with people, because I think the more we talk and the more we consider people who are afraid of the future, who are afraid of decisions concerning their revenue, to explain to them how we protect them, or we protect them for price of energy.
Fabienne Keller, I know you are leaving us now. Great to have you on board.
Thank
and
you.
As we continue tonight with guests coming in and guests leaving at the same time, I want to turn to you, Thomas, from the Socialist Public Square Group, the Alliance. It's your reaction, and again, your days are going to change, but you were nodding your head when I talked about this is a risk, this is potentially a moment that the Rassemblement National could be really celebrating now. How do you see the landscape?
Well, I mean, we've just seen that.
No, I mean the snap elections coming up.
Yeah. So, I mean, it can be a historic moment for France. I don't want ever in my life to see the far right in power. I'm from Normandy. I know what it takes, what it costs. We were commemorating the D-Day landing. Thousands of people, including a few from my family, who died as a result of the consequences of having the far right in power. So obviously, I'm going to do my bit and do everything I can. Luckily, I'm voting in an area where the sitting MP Arthur Delaporte is from the Socialist. I'm going to campaign with him, make sure that we can do whatever it takes for him to be re-elected, because we need voices from the left in the French Parliament more than ever. So yeah, I mean, this is yeah.
Just to give a bit of news that we have coming in, so Ursula von der Leyen, the lead candidate for the European People's Party, has been speaking. We don't have the soundbites yet, but we can give you a flavour of what she said. She says that we won the election in reference to the European People's Party coming out with the largest number of projected seats. And then, this is kind of the interesting bit actually to me, she says we will build a bastion against extremists from both the left and the right. Jean-Claude Trichet, does that suggest to you she's going to go for this centrist majority rather than, the speculation we had about some kind of tie-up with the ECR or something else?
What I see very, very clearly is that the former majority, which has the majority in the European Parliament, has still the majority. The PPE is a little bit higher, S&D a little bit lower, Renew Europe a little bit lower. But when you take all the estimates for the MPs, you have 400. So it suffices. So that's good news. The majority of the European Parliament, the majority of Europe, remains centre-left plus centre-right. And it seems to me that this is very important. Now, on the events that we are commenting, I have three remarks. First remark, I hope very much that the assumption, that the idea is for Macron and the Macronists to fight with extreme vigor to prevent the extreme right to take power in France is the right assumption. But time is very limited. Second assumption, I hope that it might be the case, but I'm speaking under the control of my vis-à-vis. Perhaps he has in mind that the Republicans should ally together in the next legislative election. I don't know whether it is possible or not. I'm not a political man, but I observe policy in Europe and in France from a rather centrist position, if I may, the position of a former central banker. So I don't exclude that, because clearly there is a difference between the extremists and the Republicans. Centre-left, centre-right. And the last point, and I hope that it is a totally wrong assumption, he would put in power the extreme right to prove incompetence. I hope very much that it is a wrong assumption from my part, but I have three of them.
Okay, well, let's bring you some of the updated estimates, because, of course, we're important to underline these are not final results. They're just estimates and projections. And I think we can show you the ones for France. The National Rally clearly ahead, 31.5%. Renew, 14.7%. You can see the gap has narrowed now since we last showed these figures between the Socialists and Renew. So increasingly a positive picture there for Raphael Glucksmann and the Socialist Party. France Unbowed, 9.5%. So again, clearly up from their result in 2019, Gavin.
So we're seeing a doubling, and let's make no bones about it. In the European elections for France, this is a trouncing. We have never seen a result, as Mark Perelman said a short while ago, as wide, a doubling of the score from the National Rally. We talked a moment ago to Thomas Pellerand-Carlin from the Socialist Public Square Alliance. I want to go to the Socialist Party now. Let's bring in Yinka Oyatade, and let's get an idea of the mood there tonight.
Hi there, Gavin. Yes, I'm here at the Socialist HQ, and there's been really a mood of mixed emotions. There's been cheers over the results tonight, but also anger over the National Rally's surge. And to get more reaction, I'm joined by Corinne Nagasanga, who is a senator and also a member of the executive board of the Socialist Party. What's been your mood, your feeling tonight about the results, but also this news from Emmanuel Macron that he's dissolving Parliament?
Well, we knew that unfortunately the far right, the Rassemblement National, would be coming ahead with a historic result, unfortunately. We didn't expect Emmanuel Macron to answer positively to what the Rassemblement National asked of him, which is to start new elections, 2 parliamentary elections in a few weeks. We have a responsibility because we arrived first on the left to unify the left, which was divided against in this European election. So we have a responsibility to make sure that we talk to everyone and that we're ready to work together to make sure that the far right doesn't come first at International Assembly in July.
And what kind of work do you guys need to do right now? Glucksmann was very clear that while we can celebrate, there's also a lot of work to be done.
Yes. Well, it's work that we've already been doing for a while now, and we have to amplify it. We've always been talking to other parties on the left, with also people who recognize themselves in the values that of the left that we cherish, but are not members of political parties, and we have to be able to go and talk to everyone to work together. I think building a union is always difficult, but I think we have no choice. We have a responsibility to meet the French people in this next campaign and to show them that there is another choice to bring hope again in the country, and that the far right isn't that hope, that the left can be that hope once again.
And the Socialist Party was able to secure 13 seats. They will secure just over, or projected to secure just over 14% of the votes. What's the future of the European Parliament now with these news results?
Well, we'll have to see what's happening overall at the European Parliament. We know that the far right is doing well, unfortunately, in other countries as well, not just France. And we hope that we have a bigger group for the Social Democrats and for all the combined groups on the left at the European Parliament. But we can see that this is a battle to offer a new perspectives, a new model of society, not just in France but across Europe, to show that this idea that each country is better alone and that the European Union is a problem is actually a very false, very mistaken idea. Yes.
So you're hearing that there is very much a feeling that the national rally surge is a threat to Europe, a threat to the European project. So the Socialists very much feel that it's time to get to work ahead of those upcoming elections.
Okay, we will get back to you soon, Yinka. Thank you so much for that. And let's cross to Claire Paquelin at Renaissance headquarters. Claire, you're with an MP there from the ruling party.
Yes, I'm with Antoine Armand. You are an MP, a member of Parliament, a député for Renaissance. Of course, that's Emmanuel Macron's party. How do you feel tonight? And tell me, has the president made too big of a political gamble?
It's never gambling when it's about voting and deciding for your own future and for your own political destiny. What happened tonight and today in whole Europe and in France is that far-right extremism had reached a point which is very worrying for all of us. And we need now to all gather, all Democrats, all responsible people who want their countries to get over these past months of getting over people who are migrants, getting over people who would be the cause of all our problems. This is what we have to cope with. We will have to do that in the coming weeks, which is confronting our projects against these projects of people who are not helping their countries.
has Emmanuel Macron just given a fast lane to Marine Le Pen here?
You know, what we are looking at in Europe has been existing for years now. So it could happen, it can happen, and if we don't do anything against it, if we don't take that kind of actions, it will happen. So that's also the meaning of the action of Emmanuel Macron tonight, showing that we democratic countries have a role, a major role to play to stop extremism.
So, I mean, I imagine you need to get off back to Annecy, where you live. You're going to drive home tonight, 5-6 hour drive. What are you going to be doing tomorrow? Are you going to be hitting the campaign trail straight away?
I will do what I do every week, go and see my fellow citizens and try to explain them that what we are doing in France, lowering unemployment, hiring policemen and juristic people, is what we need for France, not false and rapid solutions that are explained on TV shows.
Thank you, Antoine Armand. Thank you very much.
Claire Pacquelin, thank you. Let's give you a new updated, early predicted results from some of the other parties here in France that we now have new results for. So these we're talking about the Republican Party, the Conservatives, around a similar score they got back in 2019, 7.2%, just over that 5% mark, to which if you don't have as much as that, you lose seats, MEPs in Parliament. The Greens, 5.5%. A loss for them compared to 2019. And then we have Marianne Maréchal, the niece of Marine Le Pen and Reconquest Party, 5.4%, and the French Communists and Resist and others, well, French Communists and Resist losing out seats, others 7.5%, so independents. I want to bring in Mark Perlman a second to understand some of the dynamics that have been going on in the past few minutes since this announcement from Emmanuel Macron, the snap elections, within the parties. Talk us through it.
Well, obviously, this is new, and as usual with Emmanuel Macron, this was not known by many people. He takes decisions in a rather lonely way. Clearly, this is a major decision because he essentially upended the remainder of his second mandate because things will never be the same. He could have said, okay, we took a beating, but, you know, the rules are the rules. The National Assembly, they all have a mandate until 2027. That's it. He decided really to take a gamble. People will present it, yes, I listen to the people, but it's a major gamble when you just got trounced in the polls and essentially you're answering the call of the National Rally. They said this, but they didn't really believe Emmanuel Macron would listen to them. Let's be very, very honest. What we're already seeing is one of Emmanuel Macron's very close lieutenants, who's also the foreign minister, Stéphane Séjourné, just told our colleagues of AFP, Agence France Presse, that in the upcoming elections, the majority will not present a candidate against an outgoing MP. That's from the Republican camp or the Republican scope, which needs to be defined. But essentially, this means that if there's an outgoing socialist or green MP or conservative MP, the majority will not field a candidate against that MP to ensure essentially that the Republican votes would add up. This obviously doesn't include the National Rally, and this presumably doesn't include the far-left France Unbowed. So they're hoping that this will be enough to build a majority. But again, this is a very, very short campaign, 21 days until the second round, and this doesn't happen very frequently in French elections. I mean, you've had them when François Mitterrand was elected, then re-elected, but this was normal at the time. Jacques Chirac took that gamble in 1997. He was certain he would win. Everyone told him, you know, it's a shoo-in, don't worry, we'll have a stronger majority. He ended up losing it. So now the odds are totally against Emmanuel Macron. We'll see how this pans out, because he's also hoping that maybe the National Rally is not ready for this, that they're not present everywhere in France. There are 577 constituencies. That's a lot. They've become much more a local party than before, but nevertheless, they might be caught unprepared. And he's hoping that the French will rise against the National Rally. But hope is not necessarily the right strategy.
Well, 3 weeks to elections. Yes. We're in a scenario where...
That's a sprint. That's not a marathon.
We kind of see this thing Italy with revolving governments. And I want to go to Brussels, in fact, right now. Let's go across to Dave Keating, because it's kind of overshadowed the European elections to some degree. Yes, this is a massive moment in Europe, but this is a huge moment in France as a result of that. Dave Keating, what's the reaction there?
Well, I think the important context here, and what I keep hearing people saying, is that what happened in France isn't being repeated at European level so far, according to the exit polls. We're not seeing a huge surge for the far right. We're seeing a growth for the far right in line with the trajectory of the past 2 decades. And we just got an updated projection based on exit polls with more countries involved. And actually, the numbers have gone down for the right from that initial projection. So people here, let me tell you, they are shocked about what Macron just announced in that speech. People are confused. They don't understand why he did it. They're all running to their French colleagues to try to explain why he might have done this. I think the French colleagues are equally confused. But then, of course, we also have the developments at European level, which aren't quite so dramatic. According to these exit polls, it looks like the centrist majority will hold in the parliament, and the far right will not have the numbers to form a right-wing controlling coalition with the center-right. That being said, those are only exit polls. We won't really have a reliable projection based on actual results until the last polls close in Italy at 11 p.m. But so far, what we've seen from exit polls is a bit of comfort to people in the center. Obviously, this is not a great night for the center, and particularly not a good night for the center left. They're having a terrible night here. But people are at least taking some comfort. People from the center are taking some comfort in the fact that that centrist majority looks like it will hold.
And Dave, if I can ask you to read the tea leaves when it comes to Ursula von der Leyen, the lead candidate of the EPP, which has come out with the largest number of projected seats here. She's saying we're going to avoid both extremes on the left and on the right. What does that tell you?
It's very interesting to parse those words, right? Because what she might be referring to there, actually, we're seeing around Europe a growth for far-left parties. The GUI group in the European Parliament, the far-left group, has always been very small. It looks like it could be somewhat of a bigger player here. It will still be small in number. That may be what she's referring to. I think some people who are climate activists will be worried that what she's saying there is trying to appease those in her own center-right EPP group who have criticized her European Green Deal, her raft of climate policies that have been enacted over the past 5 years, which have come into criticism from her own party, her own group, which she does need the support of in order to become European Parliament president, as European Commission president. It's clear from the numbers that, as we expected, her EPP group will come first. By tradition, the party, the group that comes first in the election should have the Commission presidency, but I should point out that's just tradition, and actually this is really just up to the 27 leaders of the European Union. I would say, though, looking at these results, it looks like she's in good shape. She would have been worried if there were the numbers on the right to have a controlling coalition with the far right and the center right. I think she might be too moderate to have survived a confirmation vote with that majority. It does not look like that happened. I would say, based on what we're seeing so far with the exit polls, Ursula von der Leyen is probably okay.
Yeah, it's a very difficult one to call, Dave, isn't it? I was there in the same place in 2019, where it looked like Manfred Weber was the man for the European People's Party. They called it the Spitzenkandidat, and the lead candidate, suddenly it was Ursula von der Leyen. So let's see. Let me bring in Jean-Claude Trichet. Jean-Claude, I just want to get your view Europe-wide for the moment. You were nodding when Dave was talking about this picture in France, the doubling of the score for the far-right, but not necessarily reflected across Europe.
Absolutely not. As I said, the former majority is, again, the majority in the new parliament. So no problem with that. I had 3 assumptions, putting myself in the head of Macron without any prior information, of course. My assumption number 2 looks the right one, namely, the Macronists do not hope to win alone, and they do not want the I would say, Le Pen to win. And there is no demoniac strategy or tactics. So what I understand is an offer to all Republicans with the idea that a new coalition a coalition should take place in France. I understand this is the idea. We'll see what happens. The French people will decide.
Okay, let's go back to the headquarters of the National Rally, which of course has trounced President Macron's party in this in these estimated results that we have. And we're going to speak to Thibault François, who's not an MEP, but he is an MP, so a national MP in the French Parliament. Thibault François, thanks for joining us. And we've just heard a senior figure in your party saying that the National Rally will fight to make sure that Jordan Bardella goes to Matignon. That means that he will become Prime Minister. That's your goal now, I'm assuming.
Yeah, thank you for having me tonight. Yes, of course, it's one of our goals. You have seen that we have said to the French people during our campaign, if you vote, you win. And now they have the opportunity during this legislative election, general election, that we were calling to explain to the French people that if they go to vote, they're going to win. We have seen that Macron is now in high difficulties regarding the scores he had. Is just for one reason. The French people disagree with all the politics he put in place. So now we have to go back to general elections and we have to give the floor to the French people, and let's see what will be the result.
In your view, for your party, was it the fact that for National Rally, the Bardella effect, having this 28-year-old, which seemed more distant from the Le Pens, Marine Le Pen and her father, what do you see as the key reason for people turning to Rassemblement National?
The key reason, and one of the reasons, is because we are tackling the issue that the French people want to hear. We made campaign close to the people. We're in contact with them. We won the first group of opposition around Marine Le Pen in the National Assembly, and we did the first group, and we most probably are going to send the first delegation of members coming from one sole party in the European Parliament. For one reason, we were talking about the power of acquisition. We were talking about the difficulties we had and the different policies put in place by the European Parliament and the European institutions. We talked about the Migration Pact, which has an impact on the daily life of the French people. So we are going to continue in this new campaign to talk about the real issue, being very close to the French people, and finally to have some politicians dealing and talking about the issues that are facing our people.
And for the National Rally, who kicked out the Alternative for Germany from their European party, comments by Maximilian Krah, the leader for the AfD, talking about saying some of the SS, the Nazi Hitler protection squad, were not necessarily criminals. Going forward, you think there should be a cordon sanitaire from the National Rally, keeping out the AfD?
Yes, it's very clear. The declaration of this head of delegation from Alternative for Deutschland were totally unacceptable, and our president of the party and Jordan Bardella took a very firm stand, saying that we will not sit at that moment with Alternative for Deutschland, and it should be the case in the next mandate in the European Parliament.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Thibault François. And Thomas Carlin, you were shaking your head as he was making those comments. What were you thinking?
Well, I mean, the Rassemblement National is not, on the ground talking to people. They stay wherever they are. I've seen, I guess, 2 or 3 activists of the Rassemblement National in the entire campaign. I've seen, 10 green. On our side, we were more than 30. So yeah. So I mean, it's a party that, thankfully well, not thankfully, but because of, some billionaires having a big TV, like kind of our own version of Rupert Murdoch, we have a few TV channels that are campaigning for the Rassemblement National night and day. So obviously this has an effect. What really bothers me with the snap election is the number of days, like 21 days. Come on, let's be serious. Like, democracy takes a little bit of time. Democracy is not only about voting, as the ancient Greek knew. It's about debating. Having a serious debate about the future of France in 21 days? Who are we kidding? I mean, this is extremely reckless. If you want to go for a snap election, go for it. But in Britain, how much time? I mean, this was expected already, and there were a few months. In Spain, when Pedro Sanchez called for the snap elections, everybody was preparing for an election in December. It happened in July. People were already prepared. Yeah. Very few people are prepared. Even the Macronist people are not even prepared. So what we need to do here in France is what Pedro Sanchez and the Socialists did in Spain. When there was a snap election, they did win it. And not only did they win, the far right decreased as a result of the campaign that the Socialists led in Spain. It went from 15 to 10%. So in order, and we've been seeing that throughout history, in order to defeat the far right democratically, we need to have a strong center-left who has a program that shows an alternative, that shows that there's an alternative way for people who are legitimately angry. There's another way to do politics, another way to do policies for the people than what the far right is proclaiming as, the master of deceivement that they are.
You talk about reckless, you talk about the UK. The UK, there was a 6-week notice period. It was shock. In brief, it's reckless because of the risk of the far right, because there's not enough time for the Socialists, for Renew to get in gear, to get the votes?
Well, not to get the votes, but to have a proper debate. In England, there's the custom to have the snap elections, and even if they were only like 6 weeks, like everybody was waiting to have a snap election at some point. And so you have, platforms that are being built. Like in 21 days, like how can we take time to go in our constituencies and talk with our citizens to be able to hear them on what they want for France? We just did that for Europe. But that's a different topic. And obviously there are a lot of topics that are specifically French that were not really discussed in that campaign. So I think that decision is reckless. The number of days is frankly speaking outrageous. We need time to be a democracy. Now we need to be responsible and do whatever we can to make sure that we keep the far right out of government.
If I may just add, there are rules. Actually, when you dissolve the National Assembly, the election has to take place between a minimum of 21 days. So this was the option chosen.
Minimum.
A maximum of 40 days.
Yeah.
So it's not a huge time in any case, but Emmanuel Macron obviously decided to hold the election.
But
just to clarify.
It could have waited and announced that later and do an election in September, just to be clear.
Gentlemen, we have to leave it just for a few minutes and we're going to have a very short break, but thanks so far to all our guests, Thomas Pellerin-Carlin, Jean-Claude Trichet, and of course, Mark Perlman, our French politics editor. We'll be back in 5 minutes, so don't go anywhere.
In 2002, the Indian state of Gujarat erupted into religious violence, with anti-Muslim riots after a train carrying Hindu pilgrims burned to the ground. At the time, the governor of Gujarat was Narendra Modi.
Mr. Jaffrey came out and told the crowd, "You can kill me, but please spare the children and women." But the rioters did not listen. To save us, Mr. Jaffrey called Modi, all the leaders, all the ministers.
In this election year, against a backdrop of Hindu nationalism, the ghosts of the past are re-emerging.
It's a big scar in the Indian history. They can pretend that they're forgetting, they can pretend that it never happened, they can never erase it.
The 2002 Gujarat riots revisited on France 24 and France24.com.
Welcome. We're live, special election programme continuing here on France 24, and we've had the news from the projected results from the European elections. We're also getting the news here in France of the parties and the earthquake as a result of that. The decision by President Macron to dissolve Parliament, to call snap elections in 3 weeks' time. So let's first take a look and step back at how it plays out, how the scene looks party-wise. And we are seeing 31% of the vote in France to the National Rally. Expected, predicted results. That is a double the score of Macron's Renew Party, 14.7%. You can see Valerie Hayer, the leader in Europe. Go back to the 2019 elections for comparison. There was 1 percentage point in it, 23%, 23%. The Socialist Party, their slogan this year has been Réveiller l'Europe, reawake Europe, and the party's reawakened a little bit. Raphael Glucksmann, former journalist, film director, taking their result from around 8% back in 2019 to 14%. François Baud, La France Insoumise, 9.5% in 4th place. So that's how the map looks tonight. We can also hear this key moment in the last half an hour or so from President Macron calling snap elections.
OK, now let's look at the second slide. So we have some updated estimates for tonight's projected results in France. The Republicans, that's part of the EPP, the centre-right, 7.2%. So lacklustre performance for them, especially compared to their old rivals in France, the Socialists. The Green Party just scraping through there, 5.5%. So just enough to get seats in the European Parliament. We have also Reconquest, which is a far-right party led by Marion Maréchal, 5.4%. Again, just scraping through to get enough seats in this new 5-year term. And then Communists and Resist that didn't get through, Gavin, to that 5% threshold.
And as a result of that, and that victory by National Rally Party, let's hear a short while ago from the French president and that key announcement he's just made.
After having consulted Article 12 of our Constitution, I have decided to give you back the choice of our parliamentary future through the vote. I am therefore dissolving the National Assembly and will sign in a few moments a decree for legislative elections, which will be held on June the 30th for the first round and July the 7th for the second.
OK, we're going to go straight to Valerie Hayer, who is the lead candidate for President Macron's party here in France. Let's have a listen.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being with us. And thank you for your support. Tonight I wish to speak to all French people, my fellow citizens abroad, in mainland and in our overseas territories. This evening, there is no politician that loves Europe and that loves France can be satisfied. I wish to speak to the millions of you who voted for our list supporting the presidential majority. I wish to thank our activists, our candidates, and all of the campaign teams that have fought tirelessly throughout the last 100 days. In today's world, thinking that you'll be stronger by retreating with people who are like you is simply to be wrong. In today's world, the interests of the country and the French people means Europe. That is my life's fight, and that is the message that I have been communicating since the very first day of this campaign. The President of the Republic and our presidential majority gave me a responsibility which has been an honor to bear. I wish to tell you that the MEPs of the presidential majority that you selected this evening will fight every day for you. I wish there were more of us, and I wish to communicate my regrets that we're not going to be able to have so much talent with us. You decided not to put us with a majority. Throughout Europe, we've seen in the European Parliament the rise of populist movements, and this happens in Europe and in each country. The far right is a threat to dozens of sources of progress for our people. The far right is a threat to hundreds of years of progress for rights and freedoms. Choosing the far right goes against the interests of the French people, means lies in action. Choosing the far right means choosing to weaken the country because it does not respect our values, because the far right always chooses foreign powers that hate France and Europe. Tonight, the French people have sent a clear message. They want more results, more progress. They want us to change their lives faster. Many of them also chose to not speak, to not vote. The President of the French Republic has said that we need to answer those calls. He has decided to allow them to decide in what direction they want the country to go. I believe that asking the French people is always right. I'm lucky enough to have benefited from the trust of the presidential majority for the last 100 days, and I would like to say that I will continue to fight for that majority, for our ideas, and for the people who are part of our party. I will commit to provide to France a clear majority. I owe this to the French people. And tonight more than ever, I need everyone to commit so that Europe can live, so that France can live, so that the Republic can live.
Okay, so a key speech from Valerie Hayer, the leader in Europe of the Renew Party, Emmanuel Macron's party, talking about I wish there was more of us. Very interesting. Fabienne Keller running from the studio. You saw her in the background. She's just talking to us a moment ago on France 24. Let me bring in Jean-Claude Trichet, former president of the European Central Bank. Two thoughts from you, I would ask. Firstly, did they put up the wrong candidate with Valerie Hayer, given that she wasn't a known entity? And secondly, how big a moment is this for you watching in terms of French political history?
On the first question, I would only say that, of course, when you are very well known by the people, you have an advance. And I can, clearly see out of the results, all the results, I'm not speaking particularly of Madame Hayer, but all the results are clearly demonstrating that there is some kind of privilege of advances that are associated with the fact that you are known by the people. That's absolutely clear. Second point, I think I am experiencing myself as a French citizen and a European two things. First, the previous majority, the former majority in the European Parliament has again a majority, and it is very, very, very clear. So there is absolutely no signal which would be given by the European that they want to change course. First, that's very clear. In France, clearly, my interpretation is that the President of the Republic wanted to check whether he could have a coalition. which is a big change, a big political change in the French tradition, where you have two parties that are opposing one another. There, clearly, he's trying to see whether it's possible. I would think that it is very, I would say, extraordinarily difficult to imagine that his own present party could have the majority in the parliament when they have only a relative majority today. And the second, I hope very much that he's not playing a game which would be summed up in putting in power the extreme right. I am sure that it is not the idea. The idea, as far as I understand, is to try to check a possible coalition. Centre-left, centre-right.
Jean-Claude Trichet, je vous remercie. A pleasure to have you on the programme tonight. I know you're going to leave us. There's more guests come in, but thank you so much for being with us here on France 24 on a very, very interesting night. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. All the best.
And let's go now to Claire Pacalin, who is our reporter at Renaissance headquarters in Paris. So, Claire, we just heard then the lead candidate, Valerie Hayer, speaking. What were your impressions of her speech and the atmosphere in the room?
Well, lots of clapping here. Of course, this room was full of Valerie Hayer's supporters. I'm at her headquarters here, and people were pleased to see her on the stage speaking in a very defiant manner. She said that no one who loves France or Europe can be joyful. Tonight, she says that the far right threatens French values, French rights, French freedoms. She says that the incoherence, the economic incoherence of the far right also threatens to weaken France on an economic level as well. And she said that this was the combat of her life and that she will be fighting for French people. She also said that this election was an opportunity for French people to have their concerns listened to, reasonable, legitimate concerns. Debates need to be had, and she said that this snap election is the moment now to do it. Of course, there isn't much time. June 30th is just around the corner. It's a very short timescale now for the campaign to take place.
Claire, thank you. I want to also just bring in briefly Mark Perelman, because, you know, you've said it, this is a seismic moment. Just listening to some of the guests as well to mark this moment, how much of a sense do you get of a real shock within the parties now? And perhaps, like Claire was saying, are they all aboard in Renew, or are they thinking, why have you done this?
Well, they don't really have a choice. He's the boss, and that's always been the way with Emmanuel Macron. I mean, his party is a weak party. This was the party that was built for him to be elected, re-elected. The question is what happens after him, because now he's essentially a lame duck. He's still president for 3 years, but now he's upended his presidency. He doesn't really know what will happen. He probably took stock of the fact that he only has a relative majority in parliament since his re-election, and that's been difficult for him to push legislation through parliament. And now he's seeing that the verdict of the election was exactly what the polls predicted, meaning a huge victory for the national rally, and he's decided himself, only clearly with maybe a few advisors, that it's time to ask the French what they really want. But this obviously means that the favorite now is the national rally. Will they be able to win a legislative election, which is 577 seats, 577 constituencies? You have to be strong everywhere, but they clearly have the wind behind their backs. I mean, clearly we are seeing this. If you add the votes they got with those from the other far-right party, Reconquête, you have some 40% of the French electorate. So they're the clear favorites. Emmanuel Macron is hoping that he can do outside of his party what he has done inside. He built a party that was both center-left, center-right. Now he's hoping to widen the scope to include, on the left, the Socialists, the Greens, and on the right, the Conservatives, knowing that they're also very weakened entities. And he's hoping to bring them into a big tent that will be able to prove to be a challenge to the rise of the far right. But it's a major gamble. Emmanuel Macron has always said, I'm a gambler. This is how I won the presidency. Well, he really threw the dice tonight, and no one knows what will happen.
And as we saw with Fabien Keller, that complete surprise, she said, I'm still processing this.
Yeah, let's get some more atmosphere from the headquarters of the National Rally. James Andre is there. James, do you get a sense that the party is ready for a national election campaign, which, after all, as we've been hearing on our set, is very different from a European one, with just a few weeks to turn things around?
Yes, well, that's, this is what the top brass of the party have been saying. We've been asking the question, of course, and their answer is yes. They say we've been expecting this to happen for weeks and months now. So we are ready. We are ready for a campaign. We are ready to, rule the country. I was speaking to two young National Rally members, Gabriel and Raphael, who were telling me, well, we could have 180 seats in Parliament. I think that's a decent goal. They're hoping also, and there's a lot of talk here about who would be Prime Minister if the National Rally got a majority in Parliament, and everybody's saying here that, it would be Jordan Bardella and not Marine Le Pen. But if you like, it's been a roller coaster of an evening here at the National Rally, party, because simply at the beginning of the evening, well, everybody was, quite smug, thinking that they were definitely going to win tonight, win big. Then it happened. Then indeed Emmanuel Macron's speech started here on the big screen behind me, and it was incredible to see people booing him and booing everything he was saying until he said he was going to have a parliamentary dissolution, and there everybody started shouting and yelling and indeed celebrating because people were telling me, yeah, he's not going to do it. A lot of people were telling me here that they didn't believe that Macron would indeed choose choose dissolution. And well, indeed, yes, that is what happened. So yes, here, well, there's a mood that is one of victory and one of also looking at what needs to be done now. Young militants saying, right, well, we'll have to be out there tomorrow putting up posters and tracting.
And James, it's worth pointing out that what we're seeing in France, it's not being replicated across the whole of the EU in terms of a spectacular surge of identity and democracy. That doesn't seem to be happening. But of course, this must be very pleasing for people where you are in terms of the size of the delegation that the RN is going to send to the new European Parliament.
Yes, absolutely. I was speaking to, to party members here. They were telling me we will be the largest nationalist right-wing party in the European Parliament. If indeed, there's going to be 30 or 31 MEPs. They were saying that, that would give them the power to unify, to create this super group that they are hoping to manage to engineer. One explaining to me that indeed these are nationalist parties, they will have national agendas, and of course that means creating a supergroup is complicated. But he was telling me that he feels that there is today a convergence, that they have more in common than differences, and that he believes this political expert, he's one of the heads of the party, was telling me that, he believes that, yes, these differences can be ironed out, and there can be a measure of freedom as to what is voted by different members of this supergroup, and he appears to believe that this is a real possibility. So it could be a very big shift, nevertheless, at the European Union. I mean, of course, even though the hard right parties not have an outright majority, the fact of the matter is if they do structure and there are more MPs, of course, they will weigh in more on decisions. And what I've been told here is that, well, this is obviously what these National Rally supporters want, and they believe that this has been, and Jordan Bardella said it, he said it's the wind of change, and they believe that this is indeed a new political page being written both in France and in Europe, and they hope that indeed these alliances will manage to be engineered at the European Parliament.
Thank you. It looked like somebody was tickling your ear for a second, but he was changing the camera just behind you in an unfortunate framed shot. So let me bring in for a second Philip Turle, our International Affairs editor. James talking about a supergroup. He's not talking ABBA or the Beatles. He's talking about the identity and democracy on the far right, which Marine Le Pen is within, and the European Conservatives Reformists, started by the British Conservatives all that time ago, moving to the right continually. Now you probably call them right-wing nationalists, and whether they would merge together.
Well, that's the big problem. I think the challenge now for all these far-right groups is to try to form some kind of an agreement amongst themselves to move forward as one, or at least in the smallest number of groups possible, because the more they're split over different groups, the less their impact is going to be. But the problem is they don't quite often see eye to eye. Like AfD in Germany doesn't see eye to eye with Giorgia Meloni in Italy. Giorgia Meloni doesn't want to really end up being at the top of a group with Marine Le Pen, because that would mean there would be a decision about who was going to lead that group, whether it would be Giorgia Meloni who wants to lead it. She wouldn't give in to Marine Le Pen, who would also like to lead it. So they've got over the first hurdle by, well, certainly the National Rally here in France got over the first hurdle today by coming first with such a huge majority. But there's also another problem that the National Rally is going to have to come face to face with, and that is that if you look back to 1997, the last time this happened in France, where at the time President Jacques Chirac dissolved the National Assembly, there were legislative elections which brought in the Socialist Party. So Jacques Chirac was a lame-duck president for 5 years with a Socialist Prime Minister. He was from the Conservative right wing. And at the end of that 5-year period, everyone was saying, OK, Lionel Jospin is the Prime Minister. This will be a great springboard for the Socialists to get back into power. And in 2002, we had this situation where Lionel Jospin, who was the then Prime Minister, ran for president, and he wasn't even in the second round. He was beaten by the National Front at the time and Jean-Marie Le Pen. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if Jordan Bardella or Marine Le Pen becomes Prime Minister of France after these legislative elections at the end of June, that is going to lead as a springboard for them to take over the presidency in the next presidential elections in 2027. The National Rally has never been in power in France. Neither was the National Front. This is a whole new ball game for them. They could be the majority party in the National Assembly in Paris, and that will give them the responsibility that they've been asking for, but it's totally different to being in the opposition, which is what they're in right now. So it'll be very interesting to see whether they can actually put their money where their mouth is if they do take control in this country, and then use that, build on that, to run a candidate for the presidential election in 2027 to come first and take over the presidency of France. So it's by no means won either in the European Parliament or in French politics for the National Rally right now.
Okay, Philip, thank you. We'll come back to you, of course, shortly. But let's go to Catalina now. Again, Catalina Marchand de Abreu, who's been looking at all the European projections for us. Catalina, do we have an update then from the last one that we showed?
Not much of an update. We could see that the main groups still dominating in these elections are the Conservatives and the Socialists. The Conservatives with the EPP led in this election by Ursula von der Leyen with 186 seats. And then we see the Socialists that have 133 seats in this European Parliament election. In third place is Renew Europe. Our French President Emmanuel Macron's Renaissance Group is part of Renew Europe with 11% of the seats in European Parliament, but not far behind is Giorgia Meloni's ECR with 9%, almost more than 9%, 9.72% of the seats in the European Parliament. And then 10 points below, with 60 seats in Parliament, is the ID group, of which Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella's National Rally are part of this far-right group, ID, not far behind.
Catalina, well explained. Let's talk you through the dynamic of what this means, because if you're looking at the party now, all of the parties across the European Parliament, 720 seats, what matters is you reach the 3-6-1 majority to make decisions, to drive decisions through. And, well, if you count the Socialists, you count the EPP Conservatives, you count the Renew Party, including Emmanuel Macron and the Liberal centrists, they have 401 seats. You look at the ID group on the far right, the nationalist right of the ECR, they have about 130 seats. So disruptors, yes, but doesn't drive the whole of the EU forward. And that's why context matters. Dave Keating will break that down a bit more. He's our man in Brussels.
Yes, so I mean, I think what I'm hearing from the centrist party, so that each of the groups have their little stands here where it's kind of the spin zone, if you will. And what you really sense from those centrist groups is relief. This is not the nightmare scenario that they had feared based on some polling going into this election that those centrist groups might not get that majority. That was always an unlikely possibility that there could be a right-wing majority in the parliament, the centre-right EPP, Marine Le Pen's ID, and Giorgia Meloni's ECR. That clearly hasn't come to pass unless these exit polls are really, really wrong. Now, we're going to get the official results at 11 p.m., coming up pretty soon after the last polls close in Italy. But what we're seeing is that the growth of the two far-right groups, the ECR, right-wing nationalist group, and ID, the more traditional far-right group, they've grown really at the same trajectory they have been growing for 20 years. So this isn't really a surge for them, but it is a pretty big jump. What's interesting, actually, if you look at the numbers that are right at the end of this parliament, ID has actually lost seats, but that's only because they kicked out the German far-right party, AfD, just last month, and those were a lot of MEPs. So the big question is whether they welcome back the AfD, maybe after they get rid of their controversial leader, Maximilian Krog, but that still wouldn't get them anywhere near being able to form a majority with the EPP, as you just mentioned. So it looks, based on these exit polls, it looks like everything's going to kind of stay the same. However, it's this shocking victory for the RN of Marine Le Pen in France can't go ignored. It is actually possible they could be the largest single party in the European Parliament. The only one who might knock them out of that place is von der Leyen's center-right party from Germany. So they are definitely, like you say, they're going to be disruptors. I think in this election, even though this is the same trajectory of growth they've had over the past 20 years, they've crossed a threshold here into really being a major force to be reckoned with in the parliament. However, they're nowhere near being able to control the agenda.
Okay, Dave, do stay with us for more updates from Brussels, but let's bring you some figures from Germany, where the estimated results are said to have been well, quite disappointing for Chancellor Olaf Scholz, his SPD there on 14%. That's down a couple of points from the last EU election. The Greens confirming that slump that was predicted in the opinion polls, according to these estimates, down several percentage points to 12%. The AfD building on its relative success, you could say, in 2019, and the CDU, so that's the centre-right party, which is part of the EPP in the European Parliament, 29.6%. So I believe that's a very slight increase on the last election, and the Left Party, 8.3%. The Free Democrats, 4.9%. So that's a very must be a very disappointing.
Well, for the old party of Angela Merkel, you know, they will say that the holding, they're still the biggest party. Yeah. I think there is an interesting result with the AfD, where despite what happened with Maximilian Krog, the leader, and the allegations of taking money from the Chinese, which he denies, that is seeing a steadying. It's the Green Party. I mean, let's go to Nick Holsworth, because the Green Party was the party everybody was talking about in 2019. They had the surge. Not this time. Nick Holsworth in Berlin.
Indeed, the Greens have really not done very well at all. In fact, it seems that one of the reasons may be that they've extended the franchise to the 16 to 18-year-olds. And some of the earlier estimates say that the Greens have lost up to 23% from the 16 to 24 age group, which is really quite remarkable. And there are some other figures here on the support that the far right have received. Obviously, the far right hasn't done as well here as the far right has with Marine Le Pen's national rally in France, but still they put on about 5 percentage points to get about 16% of the popular vote. And it seems that most of those new voters are coming from young people. for the under 30s, they've seen an increase of 10 percentage points. So 17% of under 30s voted for the AFD. 20% of the 30 to 44 age group voted for AFD. And then the figures start to decline. You get 18% of those between 45 and 59, 11% of the over 60s. So it seems that although perhaps some commentators might have thought that younger people would be voting progressive, green, left, actually it's the other way round. Younger people seem to have overwhelmingly given their votes to the far right in this election in Germany, and the Greens have been the ones who have suffered most from that. And of course, Chancellor Scholz's party, the SPD, they've also suffered. They're down a couple of percentage points, down from about 16 last time to 14 this time.
You were reporting for us during our Europe Votes Daily show just before the election night, and I remember one of the things you said in your report was about how the Greens were being really given a run for their money by other Green forces that were trying to get votes on the basis that the Greens have sold out too much on issues like nuclear energy and so forth. Is that what the Greens are being punished for then? Are they being squeezed from all these different directions?
Yes, it does seem if the Greens are being punished for being a little bit too green, perhaps. I mean, one of the issues in Germany is that people are very concerned about energy bills, and Germany stopped using nuclear power some years ago after a lot of pressure from the Greens, and some consumers identify that as actually having helped push up the prices. Of course, the prices were pushed up more effectively by the war in Ukraine that Russia started a couple of years ago, because that caused a big spike in the prices of natural gas, in particular, something which the Germans were relying upon and used to import a large amount of from the Russian state concern Gazprom. The other issues are that younger people seem to have been scooped up by other groups. There's this European party called Volt, and they've taken some of those votes away from the Greens too, because they've also adopted green policies that seem to be a little bit friendlier. And as you've just mentioned, absolutely, the fact that the Greens were in coalition with Scholz, and Scholz's coalition has been very unpopular. He's one of the most unpopular post-war chancellors. That hasn't helped their cause whatsoever.
Nick, great to talk to you. I think you've probably definitely contended for backdrop of the night that is beautiful by the Brandenburg Gate behind you. Nick, thank you. Let's bring you the results, expected results tonight that are coming from Spain. Let's move there and let's take a look how things are panning out. What we can show you, what we know, is it's the Popular Party, the Conservative right, saying tome ya, saying we win, just by PSOE, the Socialist Party of Pedro Sanchez, the Prime Minister. Now, that is a flip reverse of what happened back in 2019, when I think Sanchez's party had something like 21 seats, double of the percentage points of the People's Party on 14 seats. So, biggest party tonight, the Conservatives, followed by the Socialists. Vox, the far-right party, Santiago Abascal, the leader, on 10%. Polling around what they might have thought they'd expect, but certainly not the far-right surge that we're seeing in France tonight. But notable, third place, Sumar, which is the left alliance led by Yolanda Diaz with the Socialist at 6.3%. We Can, the Podemos party, which suffered pretty much disappearance in the polls. Actually notable, they're still staying in there in Europe despite disappearing almost entirely in France. So 4.4% there tonight. Also looking at briefly, there's a new faction of Vox called Se Acabó la Fiesta. The party's over. That's going to make its European debut, 2 to 3 seats tonight. So that's the picture we're getting from Spain. We're likely to speak to our correspondent Sarah Morris in a short while too.
A flip, as you said, Gavin, between the Socialists and the Conservative PP from the last election. But I think we can now bring you some estimated results from Poland as well, if I'm not wrong. So here we are, KO, Civic Platform of Prime Minister Donald Tusk, 38.2%. Law and Justice, that's the Conservative opposition, which lost the election last year, 33.9%. Confederacja, the far-right party, 11.9%. and Tretia Droga, third way, so that's part of Renew Europe, 8.2%. So just before we, this is interesting because the polls, I remember we were saying a few days ago, they had Law and Justice and Civic Platform neck and neck, but this is actually quite a significant gap between the two. It's only estimates, of course, and what this is why Donald Tusk has claimed victory tonight for his Civic Platform.
It's a good point, It's worth saying. So we had the Law and Justice Party, the Conservative, ECR, so nationalists, populists, in power for a long time. They were 3 times the amount in terms of the score, the percentage points back in 2019. And I want to bring in Philip Turle again here, because we're seeing now the Civic Platform, led by Donald Tusk, the former President of the European Council, now leading the way according to predictions. You've been looking deep at the Poland results, Philip.
Well, what we've seen here is that there have been fears that the far right was going to sweep across the board in Europe, and apart from here in France, where we have this massive difference between Jordan Bardella on 33% and Valerie Hayer of the Renew Party of Emmanuel Macron half as many points behind on about 16%. We haven't seen that gap or a sizable gap like that in any other European country between the far right and then the traditional parties. And even in Poland, where there have been fears that the Law and Justice, there are 2 right-wing far-right parties there, Law and Justice on 33%, as you were just saying. That's lost 6 seats. That's gone down quite a lot since the 2019 elections. They have 19 seats. And then the Confederation, they gained 6 seats. So that puts the far right more or less in the same position as it was back in 2019. But Donald Tusk's party, the Civil Platform, KO, remains still in the lead with 38.2%. That's 21 seats. So that's 2 seats ahead of the Law and Justice Party. So it is good news for the traditional parties in Europe, in Poland, which is one of the countries where there were fears that the situation in Ukraine, the fear of Russia, security issues would all push the population to vote much more massively in favour of the far right. It doesn't appear to have been quite such a move as maybe as was anticipated before the polls took place for the European elections.
And just to get a sense of the magnitude of the moment, Philip, and some of the countries that have been voting in the north of Europe, Scandinavia, you talk about those in closer proximity to Russia. Tell us about the results we're getting and break those down for us.
Well,
now.
First of all, in Denmark, there's been no real shift to the right. The Popular Socialist Party, the SF, that has come first with 18.4%. The Social Democrats of the Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, remember she was attacked a couple of days ago and has cancelled all meetings at the moment, which is okay, but she was hit by a man in the street in Copenhagen. Her party, the Social Democrats, got 15.4%. Venstre, the left-wing party, which is actually a centre-right party, they got 13.9%, 2 seats. The Danish Folk Party, which is really the far-right party in Denmark, well, they only got 6.5%, losing 1 seat. So they actually did much worse this time round than before. Now, that could be put down to the policies that have been led by Mette Frederiksen over the past couple of years since she was elected to the role of Prime Minister, where people in Denmark tend to say, well, what we have in power here is a far-right party in all senses of the word, apart from the name. And the policies that were introduced by Mette Frederiksen to try to annihilate the Danish Folk Party seem to have paid off, and she's done better in these elections. She didn't come out first, but she's still come out pretty much on top. Then if you look at Finland, the far right has not done well there either. There's been a big leap in support for the Left Alliance on 17.4%. The National Coalition Party, which is part of the EPP, they got 24.6%. It was a very poor showing for the Finns Party, that's the far right party, down 6.2% on only 7.2% in the polling. So another night of not good news for the far right in Scandinavia. We're still waiting for the results from Sweden. They have 21 MEPs in the parliament, and there are rumours that the Sweden Democrats, the far right party there of Jimmy Åkesson, may win quite a lot of seats. He's vowing to take over, or vying to try and become the next Prime Minister of Sweden. But we'll see how well that party does.
I've interviewed Jimmy Åkesson. He talks on, and I'm sure you agree, about being a real disruptor in Europe. One of the big issues he has is migration, and yet they are a big influence within the coalition, the moderates, and the Prime Minister of Chris.
I think that, migration issue, to be honest with you, is pretty much the top discussion point in many of those Scandinavian countries, certainly in Denmark and in Sweden. So I think that was probably one of the reasons that has shaped the vote there.
OK, let's just bring you back to France for a second, because we should remind everybody that some moments ago, President Macron of France dropped a bombshell announcing the dissolution of the French Parliament and announcing a snap election in just a few weeks from now. Let's take a listen to President Macron speaking earlier this evening.
After having consulted Article 12 of our Constitution, I have decided to give you back the choice of our parliamentary future through the vote. I am therefore dissolving the National Assembly and will sign in a few moments a decree for legislative elections, which will be held on June the 30th for the first round and July the 7th for the second.
And we're here in the studio with our French politics editor, Mark Pellman, who's monitoring all the twists and turns on the French political scene. And there seems to be some intrigues brewing, Mark, with the head of Renew Europe saying that these discussions, that they're not part of discussions on the dissolution of the National Assembly. Can you break down what you're saying at the moment?
Well, basically, everyone was taken aback by Macron's decision. We learned a few minutes before 8 p.m. that he would speak, very unusual for the president to speak on an election night, except when he's running for a president, but he's done that before, and he cannot be reelected, so there was no reason. And then this surprise announcement, this bombshell, as you rightly defined it, to dissolve the National Assembly. I've heard the message of the French people. They're the ones who decide, so they should decide by casting a ballot June 30th and July 7th, that is in 21 days only. So this is a major bombshell, and so everyone was taken aback. He's meeting actually with all his ministers tonight. It never happens on a Sunday night. Usually there's a weekly cabinet meeting, most of the time on Wednesday morning. So this is an emergency meeting, and all his partners across Europe didn't expect this to happen. This is a purely national decision. He has taken a gamble. He sees that he only has a relative majority in Parliament. That's proven to be a problem for him to push through legislation, and he's hoping that he can surprise the national rally by catching them unprepared for those elections in 21 days, and at the same time rally around his party, or what's left of it, not much to be honest, but like Socialists, Greens, Conservatives and so on, to rally and essentially have a barrage, quote unquote, against the national rally and be able to build a majority. We're also learning that the French president will address the French once more in the coming days, probably to explain his decision and what his plans are, because he is the only one to know right now.
But Mark, about this barrage, can you have a barrage against the national rally without actual alliances, if it's just all the parties competing for themselves, basically?
Well, you're right. I mean, this is not the French tradition. He's forcing the French parties to learn German in a hurry, because they're going to have to build a coalition German style in 3 weeks. And this is not the way French functions. Emmanuel Macron said when he was elected, I'm going to bring everyone from the center left to the center right under my tent. The problem is that the tent has been emptying very quickly, and he doesn't have much support left, and he took stock of that today. Whether the others will agree to that, that's a big question. We can assume that the Conservatives, who took a beating again tonight, will agree. What happens on the left? The left was able to form a coalition between the Socialist, the Green, and Jean-Luc Mélenchon's France Unbowed parties, and perform rather solidly in the last elections. There have been tension. This alliance is no more. What will happen? Will the Socialists and Greens agree to have a deal with Macron, or will they decide to remain on the left with Jean-Luc Mélenchon? There are lots of questions to be asked, not a lot of time to answer them. The president hopes that rolling the dice will be in his favor, but the odds are clearly against him tonight.
A big roll of the dice. Well, let's bring you, Mark, thank you. Let's bring you some updates from Slovakia tonight. Notable because the Prime Minister, there was an assassination attempt on Robert Fico a number of weeks ago, that he survived it. He was seen actually voting today on crutches at the polling station. We've had results in the Smer, the Direction Party, left-wing populists of Robert Fico. Well, he's said they have been defeated tonight, and he's acknowledged that they've been defeated by the Social Liberal Party. So that news just coming in from Slovakia. I want to go to Brussels. I want to bring in Dave Keating now. Dave, we were talking a moment ago. Philip Till was talking about the situation in Denmark. It always reminds me of a quote from Borgen, Prime Minister Bergida at the time, saying, in Brussels, no one can hear you scream. And there's a sense that in European politics, you're either entering the election phase as an MEP on the way up or on the way down. There are a few rock stars. Is that right?
Well, that largely depends on the country, actually. I mean, in Eastern Europe, especially smaller countries, it's actually considered quite prestigious to be an MEP, and you could go in there in the middle of your career at its height. However, for bigger countries, for Western European countries, it is exactly as you say. The European Parliament has long been considered a parking place for half-retired national politicians or young politicians who want to get their start. I would say that even in Western Europe, that is changing, though. As the EU gets more into focus, as the EU has been at the center of fighting against the crises that we've experienced over the past 5 years, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the COVID crisis. So I think that that is changing over time. However, I wonder right now, with the center shrinking, it's holding, but with it shrinking, how uplifting of a place this will be for ambitious, middle-of-their-career politicians to come, especially when they're seeing the actual disagreements that are possible between these centrist parties, between the center-left and the center-right. The more narrow that grand coalition of centrist parties become, the less they can actually disagree on ideology. And over the past 5 years, in this past term, I've heard more and more complaining about this, that just to hold off the far right, they basically have to agree with the center-right EPP, the center-left, all the time. So I do wonder if these type of results might discourage talented younger politicians from coming here to Brussels.
Dave, if we can switch gears for a minute, these elections do have an impact, of course, on who gets the three top jobs in the EU, the European Commission, the Parliament, and the presidency of the EU Council. Have you got any sense of where that might be going now, or is it really too early to say anything on that?
I'd say it's too early to say. However, I think the biggest block to President von der Leyen getting there were two big potential blocks to President von der Leyen getting a second term. As a reminder, it's the 27 leaders of the European Union's countries that make a decision about who's going to be the Commission president. And it looked like President von der Leyen was a shoo-in for a second term. The leaders like her. She's fairly non-controversial. However, lately we've been hearing that President Macron was throwing other names into the mix, maybe Mario Draghi, former European Central Bank president. So I think tonight's developments are good news for her for two reasons. One is the centrist majority holds. She shouldn't have a problem being confirmed by that majority in the European Parliament. We're not looking at a right-wing majority coalition, which was a possibility, not very likely, but a possibility. But the other thing is, President Macron is going to be so distracted by this legislative election over the next month. I cannot imagine he is going to have the time or the political capital to be coming here to Brussels at the summit in which they'll make this decision on the 28th of June and throwing his weight around and suggesting another name. I think tonight's developments just made that a lot less likely, and it just made it a lot more likely that President von der Leyen will be appointed to a second term. I'd put her chances at 80% after what we've seen tonight.
80%. Thank you, Dave. The so-called Spitzenkandidaten system, the lead candidate, which doesn't always go to plan. So let's see. There's a few names in the ring. One of them is VDL. Also for European Council President, one of the other key jobs, Nita Fredriksson is being suggested. Key socialist on the centre there. Right, let's go from Brussels to Italy and Seema Gupta. We're waiting still for the predicted results there, but just talk to us about this lure moment. Both Marine Le Pen trying to attract Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister, and her Brothers of Italy party and government, and also from the centre, and how key she is right now to European politics.
Yes, I mean, she's really been dubbed as almost like the kingmaker, if you like, in this European election. She's taking centre stage because they're saying that she's being wooed by Ursula von der Leyen, who's hoping to get her support in terms of trying to get her support to be a part of this, to get her support to become the next president of the European Commission. She has been very clear and quite positive in her praise of Meloni, referring to Meloni as someone who is clearly pro-European. She's taken trips with her to countries in North Africa like Tunisia in order to work at deals at stemming migrant flows. So clearly she's hoping to partner with Meloni on that. On the other side, yes, as you mentioned, Marine Le Pen, the leader of the National Rally in France, hoping to woo Meloni, saying that perhaps join me and we can form a super group of far-right parties. Miss Meloni, for her part, hasn't actually said on whose side she'd be more inclined towards. What she's been very clear about is that she is not going to partner with the left or the Greens as far as her ECR, the European Conservatives and Reformist group, is concerned. She is hoping to repeat what she has created here in Italy, which is a coalition of right-wing parties, and that's what she says she wants to do at the European level. But I think at this stage, it's still voting for just another few more minutes here in Italy. After 11, polls close in Italy, and that's polls across the European Union for these elections. And then we'll have a clear idea of what's come out in this election. It's important to note the Brothers of Italy, the party of Miss Meloni, is projected to get some 26% or 27% of the vote, according to the final polls that were conducted some 2 weeks ago, before there was a poll silence. Now, that's a fourfold increase if you compare to the last European election in 2019, when she only got 6%. But of course, back then, she really was very much, her party was very much a fringe party. Now, of course, she's the Prime Minister of Italy and clearly hoping to put her name and her face as the lead candidate in her party for these elections here in Italy. She's hoping to do the same in terms of how well she did nationally, also at the European level.
Seema, what's your impression of this whole campaign? In the people that you spoke to, were they very kind of motivated? Were they very aware of the European stakes in all of this? Because, you know, in France, it's been quite a low visibility of the campaign. What's it been like in Italy?
Well, if you look at the election turnout so far, of course, we'll get the final figures in a few minutes. It has been lower than the other European election back in 2019. And not exactly the right comparison, but if you look at the national elections, also there was a drop in terms of voter turnout. And that is strange for Italy, which is a country that culturally people do go to vote. And so there is a turn in that direction. On top of that, I mean, it's been very much focused on national issues, things like healthcare, things like taxation. We've seen far-right parties like that of Matteo Salvini, his League party, which is together with Le Pen at the European level. He's been talking about being against any European initiative of any form, and that's been his campaign. But I think very much it's been focused here in Italy on national issues.
Seema, great to talk to you. So we will find out very soon what happens from Italy, and particularly with Giorgia Meloni. Key moment coming up. Let me bring in Philip Toll. Philip, what's your sense of covering these in the past? Particularly with Giorgia Meloni, she put herself front and centre as the group leader, even if she won't stand, and she won't stand as an MEP. But how much is about European politics, green campaigns, and how much is about a referendum on the domestic leader in power?
I think it depends to a great extent on the leader and on the country. I think Giorgia Meloni is in a fairly privileged position because she is popular in Italy. She's not been in power very long. She's changed her policies to sort of become acclimatized to the European Union and tone things down a bit. So she's like, as Seymour was saying, that the kingmaker in all of this. But I think when it comes to the National Rally, what you could say is that the easy bit was winning the European elections. The hard bit is about to start. The hard bit is trying to build those coalitions with other far-right parties in Europe. They don't get on with AfD. I'm not sure how well Marine Le Pen is going to get on with Giorgia Meloni. We'll have to see. How is Giorgia Meloni going to get on with Hungary? I mean, there are all sorts of questions about different parties and how they could forge some kind of coalition together in Europe. And then, of course, there is the fatigue once a party takes power that they don't actually come up with answers to all the promises that they did pledge to answer during the campaign. So all of this is going to play out in the next few weeks. But I think the most important thing right now is to see who wins or who comes first in the legislative elections in France. That is certainly going to play out and shape French politics for at least the next 3 years.
All right, well, it's time to wrap up. So we want to thank all of our people on set, Philip Till, Mark Perlman, our correspondents, Nick Holdsworth, Seema Gupta, Dave Keating, and, of course, all our reporters at party HQs as well, Gavin.
So to recap tonight, the centre has held the three main parties, that Renew in the centre. We've also had the Socialists and the Conservatives getting more than majority, but the increase of the far right continues to be notable. The centre has shrunk. So that's where we are, with still results to come in tonight.
LCP. Public Sénat présente.
In China, being a feminist is a daily battle.
I find that China is like a black box, disconnected from the world.
Our daughter thinks that if she's happy on her own, we'll be satisfied. But that's not enough for us.
Some women carry their message on stage.
In fact, women need us to speak up for them.
Others are forced to exile.
The political oppression and just the civic society has been more closed up.
What astounds me is finally having a place where I can express my anger.
A new edition of Reporters on France 24 and France24.com.